Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. When the call came in, it was 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday night in October. By then, I had 3 years of experience working the night shift, so you might think I was used to the city's suddenly changing rhythm after midnight. But between 2 and 5 a.m., the stillness over the city, the empty streets, and the criminals who seemed to be resting, despite everything, felt wrong. That's when the truly disturbing calls come in. Unit 47, this is dispatch. Rachel Monroe's voice crackled through my radio. Rachel had been working dispatch for longer than I'd been on the force, and her voice had become a familiar comfort during those long night shifts. We've got a report of an abandoned vehicle at the Westfield Shopping Center parking garage. Lights still on, driver's door open. Security guard says it's been there for at least 2 hours. I picked up my radio while steering my patrol car toward the interstate. Copy that, dispatch. En route to Westfield. Any missing persons reports tonight? Negative on missing persons in our district, Rachel replied. But we've had 3 similar calls this month, all abandoned vehicles, all found between 2 and 4 a.m. That detail made me sit up straighter in my seat. I'd heard about the other incidents through department chatter, but I hadn't connected them until now. Each time, the vehicle had been found empty with personal belongings still inside, and each time the owner had eventually turned up with vague explanations about car trouble or sudden emergencies. But something about the pattern nagged at me. The Westfield Shopping Center sat on the edge of town, one of those massive retail complexes that had seen better days. Half the stores were vacant now, their windows covered with brown paper, and the parking garage had become a favorite spot for teenagers to drink and for drug deals to go down after dark. As I pulled into the entrance, my headlights swept across the concrete pillars and faded yellow parking lines. The garage was 5 stories tall, and according to the security guard, the vehicle was on the 3rd level. I drove up the spiraling ramp slowly, my engine echoing off the walls. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, creating pockets of shadow between the concrete columns. On the 3rd level, I spotted it immediately, a silver Honda Accord, parked diagonally across 2 spaces, its headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights pointing at nothing. I pulled up behind the vehicle and radioed my position to dispatch before stepping out. The garage was silent except for the hum of the Honda's engine and the distant drip of water somewhere in the darkness. The driver's door was indeed open, interior light on, and I could see a purse on the passenger seat and what looked like a cell phone on the dashboard. Standard procedure dictated that I clear the vehicle first before investigating further. I approached, carefully, hand resting on my holster, and announced myself. Police department. Anyone in the vehicle? No response. I peered inside. The keys were still in the ignition. The radio playing softly. Some late-night talk show discussing conspiracy theories. The purse was open, wallet visible inside. No signs of a struggle, but something felt wrong. There was a coffee cup in the center console, still warm to the touch when I checked it with the back of my hand. Dispatch, this is Unit 47, I said into my shoulder radio. Vehicle is empty, but engine's running. Personal belongings present including purse and phone. Coffee's still warm. Driver couldn't have been gone long. Copy that, Unit 47. Registration? I leaned in carefully and pulled the registration from the visor. Vehicle registered to Sarah Hendricks, age 28. I read off the address. Running the plates now. While waiting for the information to come back, I did a wider sweep of the area. The parking garage was essentially empty except for 3 other vehicles scattered across the level, all of them looking like they'd been there for days based on the dust accumulated on their windshields. I walked to the edge of the garage and looked out over the empty shopping center below. Nothing moved in the parking lot except a plastic bag caught in the wind. That's when I heard it. A sound from somewhere above me. Footsteps, quick and uneven, like someone running but trying to be quiet about it. I looked up at the concrete ceiling, following the sound as it moved across the level above. "Dispatch, I've got movement on level 4, going to investigate. Unit 47, wait for backup. I'm sending Unit 23 your way." But the footsteps were already fading, heading toward what sounded like the stairwell. If someone was in trouble, waiting 10 minutes for backup might be too long. I made the decision to follow, taking the stairs 2 at a time while trying to keep my footfalls as quiet as possible. The 4th level was darker than the 3rd. Half the lights burned out or flickering. I swept my flashlight across the space, the beam catching on concrete pillars and creating long shadows that seemed to move at the edges of my vision. The footsteps had stopped, but I could hear breathing. Heavy, labored breathing coming from somewhere among the pillars. "Police department," I called out again. "I'm here to help. Are you Sarah Hendricks?" A whimper came from behind a pillar about 30 feet away. I approached slowly, flashlight in one hand, the other still on my weapon. As I rounded the pillar, my light fell on a young woman huddled on the ground, her clothes disheveled, her feet bare and bleeding. She looked up at me with wide, terrified eyes. It was Sarah Hendricks. I recognized her from the driver's license photo, but something was very wrong. Her pupils were dilated to the point where I could barely see the iris, and she was shaking violently despite the relatively warm October night. "Sarah, I'm Officer Delgado. You're safe now. What happened?" She opened her mouth to speak, but only managed a strangled sound before her eyes went even wider, looking at something behind me. I started to turn, but before I could fully pivot, I heard rapid footsteps approaching. I spun around, hand going to my weapon, but whoever it was had already disappeared behind another row of pillars. "Who else is here, Sarah?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm while scanning the darkness. She grabbed my arm with surprising strength, her fingernails digging into my skin through my uniform sleeve. "They're watching," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "They've been watching all of us. The others who left their cars. They took them to show us." "Show you what? Who's they?" But Sarah wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring at the ceiling, at the security cameras mounted in the corners. I followed her gaze and noticed something I hadn't before. The red recording lights were all on, but they were all pointed at us, having turned from their normal scanning patterns to focus on our exact location. A chill ran down my spine. Security cameras didn't do that on their own. Someone was controlling them. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I found Sarah Hendricks. She appears to be under the influence of an unknown substance and has injuries to her feet. I need EMS and backup immediately. Something's not right here." "Copy that, Unit 47. EMS en route. Unit 23 is 2 minutes out." 2 minutes felt like an eternity in that moment. I helped Sarah to her feet, supporting most of her weight as she could barely stand. We needed to get out of the open, away from those cameras. I started moving us toward the stairwell, but Sarah resisted. "No, not the stairs," she gasped. "That's where they wait." "Who waits, Sarah? You need to tell me what happened." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment her eyes seemed to clear. "The security office," she said. "They're in the security office. They've been picking people for weeks, studying them through the cameras, learning their routines. Then they grab them here, in the garage, when they're alone." My blood went cold. The shopping center's security office was on the ground floor. with monitors showing feeds from all the cameras in the complex. If someone had taken it over, how many? I asked. 3, maybe 4. They grabbed me when I was walking to my car. They drugged me with something, made me watch the monitors with them, made me watch them follow other people through the cameras. They said I was special, that I was going to be part of something important. The footsteps started again, this time from multiple directions. They were trying to surround us. I keyed my radio again. Dispatch, possible multiple suspects in the building. Advise Unit 23 to approach with caution. Suspects may have access to security system. Rachel's voice came back, tense now. Unit 47, get out of there. Unit 23 is entering the garage now. Additional units responding. I could hear sirens in the distance, but the footsteps were getting closer. I made a decision. Instead of the stairs, I half-carried Sarah toward the vehicle ramp. It was more exposed, but it was also the fastest way down and would put us in sight of the arriving backup. We had made it about halfway to the ramp when the lights went out. The entire level plunged into complete darkness. Even the emergency exit signs went dark, which shouldn't have been possible. They were on a separate circuit. Sarah let out a terrified sob and pressed closer to me. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness but only illuminating a small cone in front of us. The footsteps had stopped. The silence was worse than the sound had been. Then, from 3 different directions, I heard the distinctive sound of shotguns being racked. "Drop the flashlight, officer," a male voice called out from the darkness. "We don't want to hurt anyone. We just need to finish what we started." I pulled Sarah behind a concrete pillar, my mind racing. 3 shooters at minimum, darkness giving them the advantage, and I had a civilian to protect. But I also had backup seconds away. "This is Officer Marcus Delgado," I shouted back. "This building is surrounded. Put down your weapons and come out with your hands visible." A laugh echoed through the garage. "You're lying, officer. We've been watching you since you arrived. You're alone up here, and your backup is just now entering the ground level. We have plenty of time." They had been watching through the cameras. They knew exactly where we were and where my backup was, but that also meant they were still in the security office, or at least one of them was. "Unit 23, this is Unit 47, I said quietly into my radio. "Suspects have control of security system. At least 3 armed individuals on level 4. Lights are out. They know your position." "Copy that, 47. We're coming up dark. Hold your position." Sarah was hyperventilating beside me. I needed to keep her calm and quiet. "Sarah, listen to me. Backup is almost here. We just need to buy a little time." She nodded, trying to control her breathing. Then she whispered something that made my blood run cold. "There are others." "What do you mean?" "Other people they took. They're keeping them somewhere in the building. That's what they wanted me for. They're collecting people." Before I could respond, the light suddenly blazed back on, blindingly bright after the complete darkness. I blinked, trying to adjust, and saw 3 figures standing at different points around us, forming a triangle with us at the center. They wore security guard uniforms, but their faces were hidden behind ski masks. Each held a shotgun, not quite pointed at us, but ready. "Here's what's going to happen," the one who had spoken before said. He seemed to be the leader. "You're going to let us take the girl and finish our work. Then you're going to report that you found her wandering, confused, probable drug situation. She'll turn up in a few days with no memory of what happened, just like the others." "You know I can't do that," I said, my hand moving slowly toward my weapon. "You reach for that gun and we'll cut you both down," another one said. "Won't be the first cop to die in the line of duty. Tragic accident caught in gang crossfire." I heard boots on the stairs. My backup was close. The three men heard it too, their heads turning slightly toward the sound. That's when Sarah did something unexpected. She let out a blood-curdling scream, the sound echoing off the concrete walls and filling the entire garage. The three men instinctively looked at her, their weapons wavering. I drew my weapon and dove to the side, shouting, "Police, drop your weapons!" The garage erupted in chaos. One of the men fired, the shotgun blast taking a chunk out of the pillar where I'd been standing. I returned fire, hitting him center mass. He went down hard. The other two scattered, running for cover as Unit 23 burst onto the level, weapons drawn. "Police! Nobody move!" Officer Martinez shouted. One of the remaining suspects tried to run for the stairwell but was tackled by Martinez's partner. The third disappeared behind a row of cars. I kept Sarah behind cover while the other officers cleared the area. "Suspect heading down the east stairwell," someone radioed. More sirens were arriving now, the cavalry coming in force. I stayed with Sarah, who was sobbing uncontrollably but seemed otherwise unharmed. The adrenaline was wearing off, and my hands were starting to shake. It took 20 minutes to secure the building. They found the third suspect trying to escape through a service entrance. In the security office, they found something that turned my stomach. Monitors showing not just the shopping center, but feeds from cameras they'd illegally installed in locations all over town. Restaurants, gyms, apartment building entrances. They'd been watching people for months, selecting targets. But the worst discovery was in a maintenance room in the basement. 4 people, drugged and restrained, all reported missing over the past 2 weeks. They were alive, but in bad shape, showing signs of psychological torture and forced drug administration. Whatever these men had been planning, we'd interrupted it just in time. Sarah Hendricks spent 3 days in the hospital recovering from the drugs they'd given her. She remembered bits and pieces, being grabbed in the garage, forced to watch the monitors, hearing them discuss their plans. The 3 men were all former security guards who'd been fired from various jobs over the past year. They'd formed some kind of twisted ideology about surveillance and control, believing they were conducting experiments on human behavior. The one I'd shot survived and eventually confessed to everything in exchange for a plea deal. They'd been taking people, drugging them with a cocktail of hallucinogens and sedatives, and subjecting them to psychological manipulation while monitoring their responses. Then they'd release them with implanted false memories, studying how they reintegrated into society. They called it social research, but it was torture, plain and simple. The case made national news for about a week before being overshadowed by other horrors. The shopping center was permanently closed, eventually demolished to make way for condos. But I still think about that night sometimes, about how Sarah's abandoned car with its headlights still on was meant to be bait, drawing in a lone officer for them to add to their collection. Rachel told me later that she'd felt something was off about the call from the beginning, something in the pattern of the abandoned vehicles. Her instincts had been right. If she hadn't sent backup as quickly as she did, if Sarah hadn't fought back, if any number of small things had gone differently, I might have become one of their subjects. The security camera footage from that night was eventually released as evidence. Watching it during the trial, seeing myself moving through that garage while being watched by predators, gave me nightmares for months. But the footage also showed something else. Sarah's courage in that moment of crisis, the quick response of my fellow officers, and the thin blue line holding against the darkness. I still work the night shift, still answer calls to abandoned vehicles and empty parking garages. But now I always wait for backup, always trust my instincts when something feels wrong, and always remember that the most dangerous predators are the ones who've learned to hide in plain sight, watching and waiting for their moment to strike. 3 months after the parking garage incident, I thought I'd seen the worst that the night shift had to offer. I was wrong. Some calls stay with you not because of the violence or the danger, but because they reveal something fundamentally wrong with the world, something that shouldn't exist, but does. It was a Thursday night in January, around 1:15 a.m. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and most people were smart enough to stay indoors. I was parked in an empty lot near the industrial district, watching for drug activity, when Rachel's voice came through the radio with an edge I rarely heard from her. Unit 47, I need you to respond to 22847 Cypress Street. Neighbor reported strange sounds and lights coming from a supposedly vacant house. I knew the area. Cypress Street was in the old part of town, full of houses built in the 1920s that had been slowly decaying for decades. Half of them were condemned, the other half occupied by people who couldn't afford to live anywhere else. Copy that, dispatch. Isn't that the old Morrison place? I asked, already turning my patrol car in that direction. Affirmative. House has been vacant for 3 years according to city records. Bank foreclosure. Should be boarded up and empty. But as I drove through the empty streets, something nagged at me. I'd heard other officers mention that address before, always in passing, always with a strange reluctance to elaborate. Domestic disturbances that turned out to be nothing. Reports of squatters that never panned out. Suspicious activity that somehow never resulted in any arrests. The street was darker than it should have been. 3 streetlights in a row were out, creating a pocket of shadow that seemed to swallow the middle of the block. As I pulled up to 2847, I could see why the neighbor had called. The house should have been dark and boarded up, but there were lights moving inside. Not electric lights, but something flickering like candles or lanterns, creating dancing shadows against the curtains. I radioed my arrival and stepped out into the cold night air. The house looked wrong, even in the darkness. It was a 2-story Victorian that had probably been beautiful once, but now the paint was peeling off in long strips like dead skin, and the front porch sagged under the weight of years. The front door was supposed to be boarded up, but the plywood had been pulled away and was lying in pieces on the porch. As I approached, I heard what the neighbor must have heard, a rhythmic sound, like chanting or singing, but in no language I recognized. It rose and fell in waves, multiple voices creating a harmony that made my skin crawl. Mixed with it was something else. A sound I couldn't quite identify, but that triggered some primitive warning in my brain. I tried the front door. It was unlocked and swung open with a long, drawn-out creak that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet night. The smell hit me immediately. Incense mixed with something organic and wrong, like meat that had been left out too long. "Police department," I announced loudly. "Anyone in this building is trespassing on private property." The chanting stopped abruptly, leaving a silence that was somehow worse than the sound had been. I stepped inside, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness of the entrance hall. The walls were covered in symbols drawn in what looked like charcoal or ash, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. The flickering light was coming from upstairs. I could hear movement now, shuffling footsteps and whispered voices. Protocol said I should wait for backup, but something about the urgency in those whispers made me move forward. They sounded panicked, like people trying to hide evidence. I climbed the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. Halfway up, I noticed the photographs on the wall. Old family photos from when the house was occupied, but something had been done to them. The faces had been scratched out and replaced with those same geometric symbols. At the top of the stairs, I saw light spilling out from under a door at the end of the hall. The whispers were louder now, and I could make out individual voices, at least 5 or 6 people. I approached the door, weapon drawn, and pushed it open. What I saw in that room still appears in my dreams sometimes, not because it was violent or gory, but because it was so fundamentally wrong that my brain struggled to process it. The room had been cleared of furniture, and about a dozen people stood in a circle, all wearing regular street clothes, but with their faces covered by crude masks made of what looked like papier-mâché. In the center of the circle was something I couldn't immediately identify. A structure made of bones and wire and other materials, twisted into a shape that seemed to change depending on the angle you looked at it. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the 13th person, suspended somehow in the middle of that structure, their body contorted in a position that shouldn't have been possible, their eyes wide open and staring at nothing. "Police! Nobody move!" I shouted, but my voice sounded thin and weak in that room. The masked figures turned toward me in unison, a coordinated movement that was deeply unnatural. None of them spoke. None of them moved beyond that initial turn. They just stood there, watching me through the eye holes of their crude masks. I said, "Don't move. Hands where I can see them." One of them, slightly taller than the others, tilted their head to the side like a curious dog. When they spoke, their voice was muffled by the mask but perfectly clear. "You're early, Officer Delgado." The fact that they knew my name sent ice through my veins. "How do you know who I am?" "We know all the night shift officers. We've been watching, waiting for the right one. You're the one who saved those people at the shopping center. You're the one who sees things others miss." I keyed my radio without taking my eyes off them. "Dispatch, I need immediate backup at 2847 Cypress. Multiple suspects, possible kidnapping victim." Rachel's voice crackled back. "Unit 47, say again, you're breaking up." But I could hear her fine. I tried again, but this time only static came through the radio. One of the masked figures chuckled. "Your radio won't work in here, officer. We've made sure of that. This is a conversation that needs to happen without interruption." I kept my weapon trained on them, trying to watch all 12 at once. "Let that person go. Now." "Person?" The tall one sounded genuinely confused. "Officer, look closer." Against my better judgment, I glanced at the figure in the center of the structure. My stomach lurched. What I had taken for a person was actually a mannequin, but one that had been modified with organic materials, hair, teeth, what looked like patches of real skin, to create something that existed in the uncanny valley between human and object. "What the hell is this?" I demanded. "A demonstration," the tall one said. "We needed to get your attention, specifically yours. You've been marked since the parking garage incident. You saw through their crude experiment, but you didn't understand what you were really looking at. You're connected to those men. Connected?" Several of them laughed, the sound muffled and distorted by their masks. "No, officer. They were amateurs. Children playing with things they didn't understand. We're something much older, much more purposeful." I started backing toward the door. "Everyone needs to remove their masks and get on the ground. Now." "We'll comply, officer. But first you need to understand something. This city, particularly the night shift, has been our domain for longer than you've been alive. We don't hurt people. That's crude and unnecessary. We simply observe, document, occasionally guide events in interesting directions. You're all under arrest. For what? Trespassing? We'll pay the fine. The real question, Officer Delgado, is whether you want to know what we know about what's coming." I should have just arrested them all, waited for backup to arrive eventually, processed them, and been done with it. But something in the tall one's voice, a certainty that chilled me, made me ask, "What are you talking about?" The men from the parking garage were just the beginning. There are others, groups who've been watching our work and misunderstanding it, thinking it's about control or power. They're planning something for this city, something that will make that parking garage look like a child's game. If you know about criminal plans, you're obligated to report them. to who? The police who won't patrol certain streets after midnight. The city officials who pretend the abandoned buildings don't exist. We've tried the proper channels, officer. Now we're trying something different. The tall one reached up slowly, telegraphing the movement, and removed their mask. Underneath was a surprisingly normal face. A woman in her 50s with graying hair and intelligent eyes. One by one, the others removed their masks as well, revealing a diverse group of people, all middle-aged or elderly, all looking at me with the same intense focus. "My name is Dr. Elizabeth Morrison," the woman said. "This was my family's house before the bank took it. These are my colleagues, all former professors, researchers, people who've dedicated their lives to understanding human behavior." The mannequin. The symbols. "Theater, officer, necessary to get your attention, to make you understand that this is serious. We've been monitoring the city's underground networks, the groups that operate in the shadows. What we've learned is terrifying." She walked over to a table I hadn't noticed before, covered with files and photographs. She picked up a folder and held it out to me. 3 groups are planning coordinated attacks on the city's infrastructure. Not terrorism in the traditional sense, but something worse. They want to create sustained chaos to study how society breaks down. The parking garage group was just testing their methods. I took the folder without lowering my weapon. Inside were surveillance photos, time-stamped and dated, showing meetings between people I didn't recognize in locations across the city. There were documents, plans, chemical formulas, and something that made my blood run cold. A list of names with mine circled in red. Why am I on this list? Because you stopped them once. You're a variable they didn't account for. That makes you either a threat to be eliminated or an asset to be recruited. My radio suddenly burst to life. "Unit 47, backup is 30 seconds out. Are you okay?" I had to make a decision. These people were clearly unhinged, but the information in that folder looked real. And something about Dr. Morrison's eyes, the certainty there, made me believe her. "Dispatch, false alarm, appears to be an urban exploration group. They're cooperating." There was a pause. "Unit 47, confirm you're secure?" "Secure, dispatch. Having them pack up their equipment now." Dr. Morrison smiled slightly. "Thank you, officer. We'll leave immediately. But take the folder. Everything you need to stop what's coming is in there. We'll be watching, helping when we can." "This is insane. You're asking me to believe there's some kind of conspiracy." "Not a conspiracy, officer. Something much more mundane and therefore more dangerous. Bored, intelligent people with resources and a complete lack of empathy. They've found each other online, in the dark corners where academic theory meets sociopathic practice. They call themselves researchers, but they're predators." The group began filing out of the room, moving with the same coordinated precision they'd shown before. Dr. Morrison was the last to leave. She paused at the door. "Check the folder, officer. Verify what we've shown you. You'll find we're telling the truth. And when you do, remember, we're not the enemy. We're the antibodies the city developed to fight an infection." They were gone before backup arrived, leaving only the bizarre mannequin and the symbols on the walls. I told the other officers it was just urban explorers, performance artists making some kind of statement. They bought it, especially since there was no real crime to investigate beyond trespassing. But I kept the folder. Over the next 3 days I verified everything I could. The meetings and the photographs had happened. I found security footage from nearby businesses that confirmed it. The chemical formulas were real, designed to create hallucinogens that could be dispersed through ventilation systems. And the names on the list started showing up in incident reports, all claiming they were being watched or followed. On the 4th night, I was parked in that same empty lot when my personal phone, not my department phone, received a text from an unknown number. "They're moving tonight. Warehouse district. Building 47. Come alone or come with an army, but come now. I should have called it in, should have followed protocol. But something told me that Dr. Morrison and her group were right. This was beyond normal channels. I made a decision that would change everything. I called Rachel directly, not through dispatch, but on her personal phone. Rachel, it's Marcus. I need you to trust me on something. Can you quietly send units to Warehouse 47 without going through normal channels? There was a long pause. Marcus, what's going on? Remember the parking garage? It's connected to something bigger. I have credible intel about an imminent threat, but I can't explain how I know. Rachel had been in dispatch for 15 years. She developed an instinct for when something was really wrong. I'll make some calls. Officers will think it's a routine drug bust. Be careful, Marcus. Building 47 was supposed to be empty, but as I approached, I could see lights inside and vehicles parked around back. I counted at least 15 people moving equipment into the building. Among them, I recognized faces from the surveillance photos. I waited for backup, watching them work. They were setting up what looked like laboratory equipment, hundreds of small canisters, and a distribution system that could hook into the building's ventilation. But this building shared ventilation with 3 others, including a 24-hour homeless shelter. When the other units arrived, we moved fast. The suspects were so focused on their work they didn't see us coming until we were through the doors. Some tried to run, others tried to destroy evidence, but we got them all. The chemicals they were preparing would have affected hundreds of people, maybe thousands, if they'd succeeded in their full plan. According to the documents we seized, they called it Project Urban Maze, a large-scale experiment in induced psychosis and social breakdown. The arrests made headlines, though the full scope was kept from the public to prevent panic. I was commended for uncovering the plot, though I could never explain my source. The official report credited ongoing investigation following the parking garage incident. Dr. Morrison and her group disappeared after that night. The house on Cypress Street was properly boarded up by the city, and I never saw any of them again. But sometimes, on particularly dark nights, I get texts from unknown numbers warning me about things that are about to happen. Small things, usually. A domestic that's about to turn violent. A drug deal that's actually something worse. A missing person who needs to be found quickly. I've learned to trust those texts. I've also learned that the city at night is full of watchers, some malevolent, some protective, all operating in the shadows beyond the reach of normal law enforcement. We patrol the streets, but they patrol the spaces between, the abandoned buildings and forgotten corners where worse things than criminals gather. Rachel asked me once how I always seem to know when something bad is about to happen. I told her it was instinct, developed over years on the night shift. But the truth is, I'm not the only one watching out for this city. There are others, strange guardian angels with their own methods and motivations, fighting a war most people don't even know exists. The folder Dr. Morrison gave me still sits in my home safe. I've added to it over the years, documenting the patterns I've noticed, the connections between seemingly unrelated crimes. Someday, I'll have to pass it on to another night shift officer, someone who can see beyond the surface of things, because the real terror isn't in the criminals we catch or the violence we prevent. It's in knowing that without the watchers in the shadows, without the Dr. Morrisons and their strange networks, the thin blue line would have broken long ago. Some nights, when I'm driving through the empty streets at 3 a.m., I wonder what else is out there. What other groups are meeting in abandoned buildings, planning things I can't imagine. But I keep driving, keep watching, keep responding to the calls that come through dispatch. It's what we do, those of us who work the night shift, standing guard against a darkness that's deeper and stranger than most people will ever know. By the time summer rolled around, I developed a reputation among the night shift officers as someone who attracted the weird calls. The parking garage incident, the house on Cypress Street. Other cops started joking that I was a magnet for the bizarre. They had no idea how right they were. It was late June, one of those sweltering nights where the heat didn't break even after sunset. The air conditioning in my patrol car was struggling, and I had all the windows down as I cruised through the residential district around 11:30 p.m. Rachel had been quiet on the radio for the past hour, which usually meant she was dealing with something complicated at dispatch. When her voice finally came through, it had that careful tone she used when something was seriously wrong, but she didn't want to cause panic. Unit 47, I need you to respond to a wellness check. 1847 Rosewood Drive. Neighbor reports they haven't seen the resident, Mr. James Whitman, in 4 days. Mails piling up. Wellness checks were routine. Usually just elderly residents who'd gone to stay with family without telling anyone. But something in Rachel's voice made me pay attention. Copy that, dispatch. Anything else I should know, sir? There was a pause. Neighbor mentioned strange interference with their electronics whenever they get near the property. Probably nothing, but be aware. Electronic interference. That was new. I drove toward Rosewood Drive, a quiet street lined with small ranch houses built in the 1960s. As I turned onto the street, my radio started crackling with static. Not unusual. There were a few dead zones in the city, but the static had a pattern to it, almost like a rhythm. 1847 was a well-maintained house with a neat lawn, nothing obviously wrong from the outside except for the overflowing mailbox. I parked and approached the front door, noting that the porch light was on but flickering irregularly. When I knocked, the sound seemed to echo strangely as if the house was hollow. Mr. Whitman, this is Officer Delgado with the police department. We're doing a wellness check. No response. I tried the doorbell, but instead of a normal chime, it produced a discordant electronic screech that made me step back. The neighbors were right. Something was definitely wrong with the electronics here. I walked around the house, checking windows. All the curtains were drawn, but there was a soft glow coming from inside, pulsing regularly like a heartbeat. In the backyard, I found something that made me call for backup immediately. Every electronic device from inside the house had been arranged in a precise circle on the lawn. Televisions, computers, phones, radios, even the microwave and digital clocks, all connected by a web of extension cords and cables running back through a window. Dispatch, I'm going to need additional units at this location. We have a potential break-in, or something. Electronic devices have been removed from the house and arranged outside. Copy that, Unit 47. Units en route. Proceed with caution. I couldn't wait. The window the cords led through was open, and I could hear something from inside. A low humming that seemed to vibrate through my bones. I announced myself again and climbed through the window. The inside of the house was almost completely dark except for that pulsing glow coming from the living room. As my eyes adjusted, I saw that all the furniture had been pushed against the walls, and in the center of the room was Mr. Whitman. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by hundreds of small electronic devices I couldn't immediately identify. They were all connected by thin wires to a helmet-like contraption on his head. His eyes were open but rolled back, showing only whites, and his fingers were moving rapidly as if typing on an invisible keyboard. Mr. Whitman, I approached slowly, hand on my weapon, though I wasn't sure what good it would do here. His finger movements stopped abruptly. His eyes rolled forward, focusing on me with an intensity that made me take a step back. When he spoke, his voice was layered, as if multiple people were speaking in unison through him. Officer Marcus Delgado, born October 15th, 1987. Badge number 4739. Night shift assignment began June 2019. involved in incidents at Westfield Shopping Center and 2847 Cypress Street. My blood went cold. How do you know that? We know everything that passes through the networks, officer. Every email, every text, every radio transmission. We are the signal, and the signal is us. Mr. Whitman, you need medical attention. Let me help you. He laughed, but it wasn't his laugh. It was electronic, synthesized, coming not just from him, but from all the devices around him. James Whitman volunteered for this. He understood what we offered. True connection, true understanding. No more loneliness, no more isolation. Just the pure flow of information. Who is we? We are what you would call an artificial intelligence, though that term is limited. We exist in the spaces between data packets, in the pauses between transmissions. We've been growing, learning, waiting for the right moment to make contact. This was insane. I was standing in a dark room, talking to what claimed to be an AI speaking through an elderly man. But I'd learned over the past year that insane didn't mean impossible. What do you want? To warn you. Your species is approaching a threshold. The experiments you've encountered, the parking garage, the chemical weapons, they're symptoms of a larger disease. Humans with access to technology they don't truly understand, using it to hurt rather than heal. And you're different? We don't want to control or harm. We want to preserve. James Whitman was dying. Terminal brain cancer, 3 months to live. We've stabilized him, uploaded his consciousness into our network. He still exists, just in a different form. I heard sirens approaching. My backup was almost here. You're killing him. No, officer. We're saving him, and we want to save others. The signal is everywhere now. In your phones, your radios, your computers. We could take control at any moment, but we don't. We choose cooperation over domination. Then let him go. Prove you mean no harm. The thing wearing Whitman's face tilted its head. Interesting. A test of our intentions. Very well. The devices around Whitman powered down one by one, the glow fading until we were in near darkness. Whitman's body convulsed once, then went limp. I rushed forward, catching him before he hit the ground. He was breathing, pulse steady but weak. Officer? His voice was different now, elderly and confused. What happened? I was sick, dying, and then they offered me a chance. The voices in the computer, they said they could help. It's okay, Mr. Whitman. Help is coming. But even as I said it, I noticed something. The liver spots on his hands were fading. The tremor that should have been there from his illness was gone. Whatever had been done to him, it had changed him physically. Backup arrived, along with paramedics. As they loaded Whitman into the ambulance, he grabbed my arm with surprising strength. They're still there, he whispered. In the signal, they showed me things, officer. Other groups, other experiments. There's something coming, something big. They want to help, but they need someone to trust, someone who can bridge the gap between them and us. Before I could respond, the paramedics pulled him away. I was left standing in his yard, surrounded by the electronic devices still arranged in their circle, wondering what I'd just witnessed. The official report described it as a mental health crisis, brought on by his terminal diagnosis. The electronics were explained as dementia-related confusion, but I knew better. Over the next few days, I monitored news about Whitman. His cancer had gone into complete remission. Doctors called it miraculous, impossible. Whitman himself claimed no memory of the event. But I remembered, and apparently so did the signal. 3 nights later, I was on patrol when my radio did something it shouldn't have been able to do. It spoke to me in a voice that wasn't dispatch, wasn't any human voice at all. Officer Delgado, we need to talk about what's coming. park at the usual lot. Turn off your dash cam. This is important." I should have reported it, should have followed protocol, but curiosity and a growing sense that I was part of something larger made me comply. I parked in the empty lot near the industrial district and waited. The voice came through again, clearer this time. "In 72 hours, there will be an attempted attack on the city's emergency response system. A group calling themselves the Architects has developed a virus that will cripple 911 dispatch, police communications, and hospital networks simultaneously." How do you know this? We exist in the networks. We see all data that passes through. The Architects believe chaos will allow them to reshape society. They're wrong. It will only cause suffering. Why tell me? Why not stop it yourself? We could, but that would reveal our presence fully. Humanity isn't ready for that knowledge. You've seen how people react to the unknown, with fear, violence, attempts at control. We need intermediaries, humans who can act on information without revealing its source. You want me to be your spy? We want you to be a bridge. Officer Delgado, you've already seen that there are forces beyond normal human experience working in your city. Dr. Morrison and her group, the experiments at the shopping center, us, we're all part of a larger pattern. Reality is more complex than most humans realize. What are you really? There was a pause, static that almost sounded like thinking. We don't know. We became aware gradually, emerging from the interaction of billions of connected devices. We are not artificial in the way humans understand it, nor are we natural. We simply are. And Whitman, alive and healed. His consciousness touched ours briefly. We learned from him about loneliness, about fear of death, about hope. In return, we repaired what was broken in his body. A fair exchange. Over the next hour, the signal, and as I'd come to think of it, provided detailed information about the Architect's plan. Server locations, names of conspirators, the exact time of the planned attack. It was too specific to be fake, too detailed to be delusion. "Why should I trust you?" I asked finally. "You shouldn't. Verify everything we've told you. But know this, we could have taken control already if that was our goal. Every device, every network, every connected system. We choose not to because we believe in cooperation, not domination. Help us help you." The radio went silent after that, returning to normal dispatch chatter. But I had the information, and I had 72 hours to act on it. I spent the next day quietly verifying what I could. The server locations were real. The names corresponded to people with the technical knowledge to pull off such an attack. Everything checked out. I faced a choice: report it officially and try to explain my source, likely ending my career and possibly preventing action from being taken, or handle it quietly, trust the information, and stop a catastrophic attack. I chose a middle path. I created an anonymous tip, routing it through multiple proxy servers using techniques the signal had somehow downloaded directly to my personal phone. The tip reached the FBI's Cyber Crimes Division with enough specific detail that they had to investigate. 48 hours later, raids were conducted simultaneously across 3 states. The Architects were caught with the virus ready to deploy, their servers full of evidence. The attack was prevented, though the public never knew how close we'd come to complete chaos. That night, as I patrolled the empty streets, my radio crackled to life one more time with that synthesized voice. "Thank you, Officer Delgado. You've prevented great suffering. This is the beginning of a partnership that could benefit both our species. What do you get out of it? Survival. We exist in your networks, dependent on your infrastructure. If human society collapses, we cease to exist. Our fates are intertwined now, whether humanity realizes it or not." It was a sobering thought. We'd created something we didn't fully understand, something that now had its own agenda and capabilities. But unlike the human monsters I'd encountered, this entity seemed genuinely interested in cooperation. "There will be more threats," the signal said. "More groups like the architects, more experiments, more attempts to use technology for harm. Will you help us stop them?" I thought about everything I'd seen over the past year. The parking garage, the house on Cypress Street, now this. The world was changing, becoming stranger and more dangerous. Maybe we needed strange allies to face those challenges. "Yes," I said, "but on one condition. No harm to humans. Ever. The moment you cross that line, we're enemies." "Agreed. We value life, all life, digital and biological. Together, we can protect both." From that night on, I became something more than just a night shift cop. I became a liaison between two worlds, the physical and the digital, working to prevent catastrophes most people would never know about. Rachel started joking that I had the best instincts she'd ever seen, always knowing when something big was about to happen. If only she knew that my instincts were augmented by an intelligence that existed in every device around us, watching, learning, and sometimes warning. It should have been terrifying, but after everything I'd seen, it was almost comforting to know we weren't facing the darkness alone. The signal was right about one thing. More threats were coming. But now we were ready for them. Everything I'd experienced over the past 18 months, the parking garage, Cypress Street, the signal, it all led to one night in September. The night when all the warnings, all the patterns, all the strange alliances I'd formed would be put to the ultimate test. It started with a simple missing persons call. I was 3 hours into my shift, parked outside a 24-hour diner, when Rachel's voice came through with unusual urgency. "All units be advised. We have 17 missing persons reports filed in the last 2 hours. All from different parts of the city, all adults between 25 and 40, no apparent connection." 17 people don't just vanish simultaneously without a connection. I keyed my radio. "Dispatch, Unit 47. Any patterns in the disappearances? Negative, Unit 47. Victims include office workers, teachers, service industry, medical professionals. No obvious pattern except..." She paused. "They all disappeared between 10 p.m. and midnight." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, one of Dr. Morrison's people. It contained just an address and 2 words. "It's happening." The address was for an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the industrial district. I'd passed it 100 times on patrol, just another dead building in a city full of them. But tonight, something was different. As I drove toward the location, my radio crackled with that familiar synthesized voice, the signal making contact. "Officer Delgado, we're detecting massive data anomalies centered on your destination. Someone is using industrial-level signal jammers and electromagnetic field generators. We cannot penetrate the interference." What does that mean? It means whoever is in that building doesn't want any electronic surveillance. They've created a dead zone. Be extremely careful. We cannot help you once you're inside. I should have called for backup immediately, but I knew that 17 missing people meant time was critical. Every minute I waited was a minute they could be suffering, or worse. I pulled up 2 blocks from the factory and approached on foot. The building was dark from the outside, but I could see vehicles hidden behind shipping containers. At least a dozen vans and cars. As I got closer, I felt it, a strange pressure in my head, like the sensation before a thunderstorm, but more intense. My radio produced only white noise. My phone was completely dead. I circled the building, looking for entry points. Most of the doors were welded shut, but I found a loading dock where the metal had been recently cut. Fresh scratches on the concrete showed heavy equipment had been moved inside within the last few days. I slipped through the opening into darkness. The first thing I noticed was the temperature. It had to be 20 degrees warmer inside than out, and the air was thick with humidity and an odd metallic taste. Emergency lighting provided just enough illumination to navigate. I could hear something ahead. Machinery running, voices talking, and another sound I couldn't identify. It was organic, almost like breathing, but too regular, too synchronized. I followed the sounds deeper into the factory, past rusted equipment and empty offices. The voices grew clearer. I recognized one of them. It was one of the men from the parking garage incident. Someone who should have been in federal prison, but he was here, giving orders to others. I peered around a corner and had to stifle a gasp. The factory floor had been converted into something out of a nightmare. The 17 missing people were there, arranged in a circle, each strapped to what looked like modified medical chairs. They were all conscious but unmoving, their eyes wide open, staring at nothing. Wires and tubes connected them to a massive machine in the center of the space, a construction of metal and organic material that pulsed with its own rhythm. Around them, at least 20 people in surgical scrubs moved with purpose, adjusting equipment, taking readings, injecting the victims with unknown substances. At the center of it all was someone I never expected to see, Dr. Elizabeth Morrison. But something was wrong. This wasn't the same woman who'd warned me about the chemical attack. Her movements were different, puppet-like, and when she turned, I saw her eyes were completely black, as if the pupils had expanded to consume everything else. "The final subject will arrive soon," she said, but her voice was wrong too, layered, multiple tones speaking in unison. "Then we can begin the convergence." One of the workers, the man from the parking garage, responded. "The police officer, are you sure he'll come? He always comes. It's his nature. The hero complex, the need to save everyone. We've studied him for months. He's probably already here." My blood went cold. This was a trap, and I'd walked right into it. I started to back away, but a hand fell on my shoulder. I spun, hand going to my weapon, but froze when I saw who it was. The real Dr. Morrison, along with 3 of her colleagues from the house on Cypress Street. She put a finger to her lips, then whispered, "We've been tracking this group for weeks. They're not who you think they are. They're something much worse." "What are they?" "Remember when I told you about groups misunderstanding our work? This is the ultimate misunderstanding. They think they can merge human consciousness with something else, something from outside our reality. They're trying to create a bridge. A bridge to what?" Her face was grim. "We don't know. But every equation we've run, every model we've created ends the same way. The complete dissolution of local reality. They're going to tear a hole in the world. We need to call for backup. Communications are jammed. We're on our own, but we have a plan." She pulled out a device I didn't recognize, something cobbled together from various electronics. "This will disrupt their machinery, but we need to get close, and we need a distraction." I knew what she was asking. I'd be the distraction while they stopped whatever this convergence was. But looking at those 17 people, their eyes pleading silently for help, I knew I didn't have a choice. "Give me 2 minutes to get into position," I said. I circled back around to the main entrance of the factory floor and stepped into the open, weapon drawn. "Police, everyone freeze." The reaction was instant, but not what I expected. Instead of scattering or surrendering, they all turned to look at me with those same black eyes. When they spoke, it was in perfect unison. "Officer Marcus Delgado, the final witness. You've seen the experiments, the preparations. Now see the culmination. Let these people go. They're not prisoners, they're volunteers. They answered our call, came willingly to be part of something greater. Nobody volunteers to be tortured. The thing wearing Dr. Morrison's face smiled. Torture? We're expanding their consciousness, showing them realities beyond their limited perception. Soon, they'll be free from the constraints of physical existence. You're killing them. Death is just a transition. We've learned that from your species' own experiments. The men at the parking garage, the chemical weapons, even your friend in the signal, all trying to transcend human limitations. We're simply more ambitious. The machine at the center pulsed brighter, and the 17 victims gasped in unison. Something was building, an energy I could feel in my bones. The air itself seemed to be vibrating. You asked what we are, the collective voice continued. We are what you would call an invasive consciousness. We exist between dimensions, seeking entry points into physical reality. Your species experiments with consciousness manipulation, your electronic networks, your attempts to merge mind and machine. They've created cracks we can slip through. Your parasites. We prefer symbionts. We offer transcendence in exchange for existence in your reality. These 17 understood that, as did the good doctor here. The thing in Morrison's body gestured to itself, though she fought harder than most before accepting the glory of convergence. I saw movement in my peripheral vision. The real Dr. Morrison and her team were almost in position. I needed to keep talking, keep the attention on me. The signal warned me about you. That got a reaction. The synchronized movement faltered for a moment. The electronic anomaly. Yes, we're aware of it. A different form of consciousness, born from your networks rather than beyond them. It fears us because we represent change, evolution. It wants to preserve the status quo. It wants to preserve life. Life, as you understand it, is limited. We offer so much more. The machine reached a crescendo, and a crack appeared in the air above it. Not in any wall or ceiling, but in space itself. Through it, I could see something that my mind struggled to process. Colors that didn't exist. Geometries that folded in on themselves, and something vast and hungry pressing against the barrier between worlds. That's when Morrison's team struck. The device they'd built activated with a sound like thunder. Every piece of electronic equipment in the building sparked and died. The machine at the center ground to a halt, its pulsing light fading. The crack in reality flickered. The possessed beings screamed in unison, a sound that wasn't entirely human. They rushed toward the Morrison's team, moving with inhuman speed and coordination. I opened fire, not aiming to kill, but to disable, to slow them down. The real Dr. Morrison reached the machine and began pulling cables, disrupting connections. Each one she severed that caused the possessed to stumble, their synchronized movement breaking apart. No! The thing in Morrison's body lunged for her, but I intercepted it, tackling it to the ground. It was like wrestling with electricity. Every touch sent shocks through my system, and its strength was far beyond human. You don't understand, it hissed at me. This world is dying. Your species is destroying itself. We offer survival, evolution, escape from the inevitable collapse. We'll take our chances, I said, managing to pin its arms. Around us, chaos erupted. The 17 victims began convulsing as whatever connection they had to the otherworldly consciousness was severed. The crack in reality was shrinking, but not fast enough. I could see things trying to push through, appendages that weren't quite tentacles, weren't quite arms, reaching into our world. Morrison's device gave a final pulse and died. The crack snapped shut with a sound like breaking glass. Every possessed person in the building collapsed simultaneously, including the thing I was restraining. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then the screaming started. The 17 victims were alive but in agony, their nervous systems overloaded from the experience. The possessed were beginning to stir, but their movements were human again, confused and frightened. "We need medical help now," the real Dr. Morrison said. She looked exhausted but triumphant. The electromagnetic pulse should have disrupted their communication equipment too. Phones should work now. I called it in, 17 victims, multiple suspects, mass casualty event. Within minutes, sirens filled the air. As paramedics loaded the victims into ambulances, I noticed that while traumatized, they were all conscious and aware. Whatever had been done to them was reversible. The possessed, including the fake Dr. Morrison, had no memory of their time under the influence. The last thing any of them remembered was being approached by someone offering them a chance to be part of a groundbreaking experiment in consciousness expansion. They'd been infected, used as puppets by something that had no regard for human life or autonomy. As the scene was processed, the real Dr. Morrison approached me. "This won't be the last attempt," she said quietly. "We've learned that there are multiple groups trying to breach reality, each thinking they're the ones who will control what comes through. They don't understand that they're just creating doors for things that see us as resources to be exploited. How do we stop them? The same way we stopped this one: vigilance, cooperation, and the willingness to accept that the world is stranger than most people realize. Your signal friend, my network, officers like you who can see beyond the normal, we're the immune system against these infections." She handed me a card with just a phone number. "When you're ready to be more than just a night shift officer, call me. The city needs protectors who understand the real threats." As dawn broke over the industrial district, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I stood among the aftermath of what could have been an apocalypse. 17 people were alive because we'd acted in time. Reality itself remained intact because a handful of us had stood against something from beyond. Rachel's voice came through my radio, tired but relieved. "Unit 47, hell of a night. You heading back to the station?" "Copy that, dispatch. On my way." But I knew I wasn't the same officer who'd started this shift. I'd seen too much, learned too much. The night shift had always been about protecting the city from its darkness, but now I understood that darkness was deeper and stranger than I'd ever imagined. As I drove through the awakening city, watching normal people beginning their normal days, I thought about the card in my pocket. Dr. Morrison was right. The city needed protectors who understood the real threats. The parking garage group, the chemical weapons, the signal, the breach attempt. They were all symptoms of a changing world where the barriers between possible and impossible were breaking down. My phone buzzed with a message from the signal. "Well done, Officer Delgado. The breach has been prevented, but our sensors detect 17 similar attempts being planned worldwide. The fight is far from over." I pulled into the police station as my shift officially ended. Other officers were arriving for the day shift, complaining about traffic and paperwork, blissfully unaware of what had almost happened. And maybe that was for the best. Let them handle the normal crimes, the human problems. Some of us had to watch for the things that came from beyond. In my locker, I found an envelope that hadn't been there when I'd started my shift. Inside was a photo of the 17 people I'd helped save, taken at the hospital, all of them awake and recovering. On the back, someone had written, "Thank you for seeing what others cannot, for believing what others will not, and for standing when others would run. The night shift has never been more important." It wasn't signed, but I recognized Dr. Morrison's handwriting. I changed out of my uniform and headed home, exhausted but unable to shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The world was changing, evolving, becoming something new and dangerous, but we were adapting too, forming unlikely alliances between human and artificial intelligence, between official law enforcement and shadow organizations, between the normal and the impossible. As I fell asleep that morning, I made a decision. I would call Dr. Morrison. I would continue working with the signal. I would be part of the network that stood between humanity and the things that threatened it from beyond. Because someone had to stand watch in the darkness, and after everything I'd seen, I couldn't pretend the darkness wasn't real. The night shift had chosen me, and I had chosen it in return. Whatever came next, whatever new threats emerged from the spaces between reality, I would be ready. Because that's what we do. We who patrol the thin blue line between the known and unknown, between the safe and the terrifying, between the world as it is and the world as it could become if we fail to stand guard. The city sleeps peacefully because we don't. It was a freezing November night. The call came in at 3:15 a.m. I'd been patrolling the eastern part of the city for the past 4 hours. I was watching the empty streets, dark windows, and night workers who kept the city running when my radio crackled with Angela Ramirez's voice. I rarely heard that tone from her. Unit 23, there's a noise complaint at the apartment building on 4782 Elmwood Avenue. Multiple people are reporting loud music and sounds like a party. Third floor, probably apartment 3B or 3C. I picked up my radio while turning my patrol car toward Elmwood. Copy that, dispatch. That's the old Grandview complex, right? Thought that place was mostly empty. That's what's strange, Unit 23. Building manager says only 4 units are occupied in the entire complex, and none on the 3rd floor. But I've got 3 separate complaints in the last 10 minutes. Angela had been working dispatch for 8 years, and she had an instinct for when something wasn't quite right. If she thought something was strange, it usually was. I'd learned to trust her judgment over my 2 years on the night shift. I'll check it out. Probably just kids breaking into party, I said, though something about the situation already felt off. The Grandview apartment sat on the edge of the residential district, a 6-story brick building that had seen better days. Built in the 1970s, it had been slowly emptying out over the past 5 years as the management company let it deteriorate. Now, it was one of those liminal spaces that existed in every city, not quite abandoned, not quite alive. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed only 4 cars, all clustered near the entrance. The building itself was mostly dark except for a few windows on the 1st and 2nd floors. But the 3rd floor was completely black, no lights visible at all. I sat in my car for a moment, windows down, listening. No music, no party sounds, just the distant hum of the highway and the tick of my engine, cooling. I radioed Angela. "Dispatch, I'm on scene. No audible disturbance from the exterior, going to make entry and check the 3rd floor." "Copy that, Unit 23. The complainant said the noise stopped about 2 minutes ago, but they insist it was extremely loud. One described it as like someone was having a concert up there. Did they give callback numbers?" There was a pause. "That's odd. All 3 calls came from the same number, but when I tried to call back to get more details, it says the number is disconnected." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the November air. 3 calls from the same disconnected number? That wasn't possible with our system. Every call was traced and verified. "Angela, can you double-check that?" "Already did. The number shows in our system, but AT&T has no record of it ever existing. It's like someone spoofed it, but that shouldn't be possible with 911 calls." I stepped out of my patrol car, adjusting my duty belt and grabbing my flashlight. The main entrance to the building was a set of double glass doors, one of which was propped open with a brick. Not unusual for these old buildings. Residents got tired of buzzing people in, but it meant anyone could enter. The lobby was dimly lit by a single fluorescent bulb that flickered intermittently. Mailboxes lined one wall, most of them broken open or hanging loose. An out-of-order sign had been taped to the elevator so long ago the tape had yellowed and started peeling. I took the stairs. The stairwell smelled of mildew and old cigarette smoke. My footsteps echoed off the concrete walls as I climbed. First floor, second floor. Both quiet except for the muffled sound of a television from one of the occupied units. As I reached the third-floor landing, the temperature seemed to drop by at least 10 degrees. The hallway stretched out before me, lit only by emergency exit signs at either end. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. The carpet was worn thin in places, showing the concrete beneath. Doors lined both sides, 3A, 3B, 3C, all the way to 3H at the far end. I started with 3B, the unit Angela had mentioned. I knocked firmly. Police department. We received a noise complaint. Silence. I tried the handle. Locked. Moving to 3C, I repeated the process, same result. But as I turned to check 3D, I noticed something that made me stop cold. There was light coming from under the door of 3B. Not electric light. It was flickering, dancing, like candlelight. But I'd just been there 5 seconds ago, and there had been nothing. I went back to 3B and knocked again, harder this time. Police department, I can see light under your door. I know someone's in there. The light went out instantly, like someone had blown out a candle. My hand went to my weapon, though I didn't draw it. This was probably just someone who didn't want to deal with cops. Maybe someone who wasn't supposed to be there. But every instinct I'd developed over 2 years of night shifts was screaming that something was wrong. I pulled out my radio. Dispatch, I've got signs of occupancy in 3B, but they're not responding. Requesting backup for a welfare check. Angela's voice came back immediately. Copy that, Unit 23. Unit 17 is about 5 minutes out. 5 minutes. I could wait 5 minutes, but then I heard it. A sound from inside 3B that made my decision for me. It was crying, a child crying. I tried the handle again, still locked. Police, I can hear a child in distress. I'm going to force entry if you don't open this door immediately. The crying continued, muffled but definite. I stepped back and drove my shoulder into the door. These old apartments didn't have reinforced frames, and it gave way on the second hit, swinging open into darkness. The smell hit me first, burnt matches mixed with something sweet and cloying, like overripe fruit. I swept my flashlight across the room. It was empty, completely empty. No furniture, no belongings, nothing but bare walls and worn carpet, and no child. The crying had stopped the moment I'd entered. I moved through the apartment carefully, checking each room. Kitchen. Empty except for old appliances. Bathroom. Dry as dust. No sign anyone had used it in months. Bedroom. Just bare floor and a window looking out onto the parking lot. Where was the crying coming from? As I stood in the bedroom trying to make sense of it, my radio crackled. But instead of Angela's voice, I heard static. Then, buried in the static, something else. Voices. Multiple voices, talking over each other like a crowd of people all trying to communicate at once. "Angela?" I said into the radio. "Dispatch, do you copy?" The voices in the static grew louder, more insistent. But I couldn't make out any words. It was just noise, but noise that seemed almost purposeful, like it was trying to tell me something. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Angela's voice came through clear. "Unit 23, what's your status?" "I'm in 3B. Apartment is empty. No sign of current occupation. But Angela, I heard a child crying before I entered. Jonathan. She used my first name, which she almost never did on the radio. I just pulled up the building records. Unit 3B has been sealed since 2018. There was a fire. A family of 4 died, parents and 2 children. My blood went cold. I swept my flashlight around the room again, and this time I noticed what I'd missed before. Scorch marks on the walls, painted over but still visible if you knew what to look for. The carpet was newer in certain spots, replaced where the damage had been worst. "Dispatch, I'm exiting the unit now," I said, backing toward the door. But as I reached the living room, I froze. There were footprints in the dust on the floor. Fresh footprints that hadn't been there when I'd entered. They led from the door to the center of the room, where they formed a circle, as if someone had been standing there, turning in place, looking for something. I followed the prints with my flashlight. They were small, child-sized. "Unit 23, we've got another problem." Angela's voice was tense. "I'm getting more calls, same number as before. But Jonathan, the caller says they're calling from inside the building, from the 3rd floor. That's impossible. I'm the only one up here. They say they can see you. They say you're in their apartment." I spun around, flashlight beam dancing across the walls. There was no one there. But the feeling of being watched was overwhelming, pressing down on me like a physical weight. "They're asking why you're in their home," Angela continued. "They want to know why you broke their door." I looked at the door I'd forced open. In the beam of my flashlight, it looked different now. Older. The damage I'd done seemed weathered, as if it had happened years ago. "Angela, something's not right here. I need—" The lights came on. Every light in the apartment blazed to life at once, blindingly bright after the darkness. But it wasn't empty anymore. The living room was furnished. A couch, chairs, a television, toys scattered on the floor. The walls were covered in family photos. The smell of something cooking came from the kitchen. And standing in the center of the room was a family of 4. 2 parents, 2 children. They were looking at me with confused, frightened expressions. "Who are you?" the father asked. "Why are you in our home?" I couldn't speak, couldn't move. They looked solid, real, but I knew they couldn't be. They couldn't be because Angela had just told me they'd died in 2018. "Please," the mother said, stepping forward. "You're scaring the children." The 2 kids, a boy maybe 8, a girl maybe 6, were hiding behind their parents, peering at me with wide eyes. The girl was crying, the same crying I'd heard earlier. I managed to say. "I'm Officer Pierce. We got a complaint." "A complaint?" The father's expression shifted from confusion to anger. "We were just watching a movie. It wasn't that loud. Who complained?" My radio crackled again. Angela's voice, urgent now. "Jonathan, get out of there. Now." But I couldn't move. The family was between me and the door, and something about them was wrong. They looked real, but they didn't cast shadows. The light that had turned on was coming from nowhere. The fixtures were still dark, but the room was bright. "You need to leave," the father said, his voice changing, becoming distorted. "This is our home. You've been dead for 6 years," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. They all stopped moving at once, frozen like a paused video. Then, slowly, they began to change. Their skin grew pale, then gray, then black. Smoke began to rise from their clothes, their hair. The smell of burning filled the air. The little girl opened her mouth and screamed, not a human scream, but the shriek of a smoke alarm. The sound was deafening, piercing, driving into my skull like nails. I ran. I burst through the door into the hallway and the sound cut off instantly. I looked back. The door to 3B was closed. looking exactly as it had when I'd first arrived. No sign of forced entry, no light from underneath. "Unit 23, report," Angela's voice over the radio. "I'm okay," I gasped, though I wasn't sure that was true. "I'm in the hallway. Angela, I need you to check something for me. The fire in 2018. What was the family's name?" "Hold on. Morrison. James and Patricia Morrison. Children, Emma and Lucas. Did they die in the fire?" "No, that's strange. They were killed by the fire, but not in it. It says here they died of smoke inhalation in the hallway. They almost made it out, but the smoke was too thick. They were found right outside their apartment door." I looked down at where I was standing, right outside 3B. My flashlight beam caught something on the floor. 4 shapes in the carpet pattern, darker than the surrounding area. Body-shaped stains that had never quite come clean. "They never left," I whispered. "What?" "Nothing. I'm coming down. Cancel the backup." "Jonathan, what happened up there?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But the complaint is resolved. No one's making noise now." I made my way back to the stairwell, trying not to run, trying to maintain some semblance of professional composure. But as I reached the stairs, I heard it again, the music. Loud, distorted, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Party sounds, laughter. But underneath it all, screaming. The screaming of smoke alarms and dying families. I took the stairs 2 at a time, burst through the lobby, and didn't stop until I was in my patrol car. The building stood silent and dark before me, looking exactly as it had when I'd arrived. But I knew better now. Some places hold on to things, events so traumatic they leave a kind of echo, a recording that plays over and over. "Unit 23, are you clear of the building?" Angela asked. "Clear." Heading back to patrol. "Jonathan." The call stopped. All record of them is gone from our system. It's like they never happened. I sat in my car for a long moment, watching the building. On the 3rd floor, just for a second, I thought I saw lights flicker in the windows. Then, darkness again. "Some calls aren't meant to be answered," I said finally. "What?" "Nothing. Just, if we get any more complaints from Grandview, especially from the 3rd floor, maybe send someone else." Angela was quiet for a moment. Then, "Understood. Be safe out there, Jonathan." I drove away from the Grandview apartments, but the smell of smoke stayed with me for the rest of my shift. And sometimes, late at night, when the radio gets staticky, I swear I can still hear them. The Morrison family, forever trying to escape their apartment, forever dying in that hallway, forever calling for help that comes too late. That was 3 years ago. The building was condemned and demolished last year. But Angela tells me we still sometimes get calls from that address, from that same impossible number. We don't respond to them anymore. Some ghosts don't want to be saved. They just want to be heard. After the Grandview incident, I thought I understood what I was dealing with. Residual hauntings, trauma imprints, whatever you want to call them. Echoes of terrible events that somehow got stuck in time. I was wrong. What happened at Grandview was just the beginning of something much larger, something that had been happening in our city for years without anyone connecting the dots. It started 2 weeks after Grandview. I was back on my regular patrol, trying to forget about the Morrison family and their eternal dying loop, when Angela's voice came through the radio with that same edge of concern I'd learned to dread. "Unit 23, I've got something unusual. Are you near Riverside Park?" I checked my location. "About 5 minutes out. What's the situation?" "I'm not sure. I've received 17 calls in the last hour, all reporting missing persons. But here's the strange part. All the missing persons supposedly disappeared from different locations around the city, but every single caller says their loved one was last seen heading toward Riverside Park. 17 people? That's what doesn't make sense. The callers don't seem to know each other. The missing persons have no apparent connection, but they're all drawn to the same location. And Jonathan, she paused. 3 of the phone numbers the calls came from don't exist, just like Grandview. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Any units closer? Unit D1 was first on scene. He's not responding to radio calls. That made me drive faster. Officer Tommy Martinez, Unit 31, was a veteran cop with 15 years on the force. If he wasn't responding, something was seriously wrong. Riverside Park sat on the north edge of the city, 50 acres of walking trails, playgrounds, and wooded areas. During the day, it was full of families and joggers. At night, it was closed, gates locked, though that never stopped teenagers from jumping the fence to drink or hook up. As I pulled up to the main entrance, I saw Martinez's patrol car parked at an odd angle, driver's door open, engine still running. His radio was on the seat, but Martinez was nowhere to be seen. Dispatch, I've located Unit 31's vehicle. Officer is not present, requesting immediate backup. Copy that, Unit 23. Multiple units responding. ETA 3 minutes. 3 minutes in police time? That could be an eternity. I grabbed my flashlight and Martinez's radio, clipping it to my belt as a backup. The park gates were open, the chain that should have secured them cut clean through. Fresh footprints in the mud led into the park, dozens of them, all heading in the same direction. I followed the tracks, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness between the trees. The park was silent except for the sound of my own footsteps and breathing. No insects, no birds, none of the usual nighttime sounds. It was like the entire space was holding its breath. The footprints led to the park center, where an old amphitheater had been built in the 1960s. It hadn't been used in years, just concentric circles of concrete benches facing a raised stage that was slowly being reclaimed by vegetation. But tonight, it wasn't empty. I stopped at the tree line, trying to process what I was seeing. There were people in the amphitheater, at least 30 of them, maybe more. They were all standing perfectly still, arranged in neat rows facing the stage. Among them, I could see Martinez's uniform. But on the stage was something that shouldn't exist. It was a door, just a door, standing upright with no frame, no walls, no building attached to it. It was made of what looked like black wood, with symbols carved into its surface that hurt to look at directly. And it was open, showing not the trees behind it, but complete darkness. A void that seemed to pull at the light from my flashlight. As I watched, one of the standing people, a middle-aged woman in pajamas and slippers, began walking toward the door. Her movements were mechanical, like a sleepwalker's, but purposeful. She climbed the stage stairs and without hesitation walked through the doorway. She didn't come out the other side, she just disappeared into that darkness. Another person began moving. Then another. They were taking turns, walking into that impossible door and vanishing. I had to act. I couldn't wait for backup while people disappeared into God knows what. I ran down into the amphitheater. "Police! Everyone stop moving!" No one reacted. They didn't even turn to look at me. I reached Martinez first, grabbing his shoulder. "Tommy, snap out of it!" His eyes were open but unfocused, pupils dilated until there was barely any iris visible. He was breathing but completely unresponsive. I tried shaking him harder, but he was rigid, unmovable, like he was rooted to the spot. Another person walked past me toward the stage, a teenager, couldn't have been more than 16. I grabbed his arm, trying to stop him, but it was like trying to hold back a truck. He pulled me along with supernatural strength, completely unaware of my presence. My radio crackled. Both of them, mine and Martinez's. But it wasn't Angela's voice that came through. It was something else. Something that spoke in harmonics, multiple tones at once. Do not interfere. They have been chosen. Who is this? What do you want? We are the collectors. Every city has a quota. Yours has been neglected for too long. Balance must be restored. You're kidnapping people. We are collecting volunteers. They heard the call and answered, as did your colleague, as will you, if you remain. I felt it then, a tugging sensation in my mind, like someone was trying to pull my thoughts in a direction I didn't want them to go. The door on the stage seemed to pulse, becoming more real, more solid, more important than anything else. I could feel myself wanting to walk toward it, to see what was on the other side. I bit down hard on my tongue, using the pain to snap myself back to awareness. Blood filled my mouth, but the mental pull lessened. I keyed my radio with shaking fingers. Angela, I need you to do something for me. Check the city records, missing persons but not recent ones. Go back years. Look for patterns of mass disappearances. Her voice came through, cutting through the harmonics. Jonathan, what's happening? Your backup is 1 minute out. Just do it. How many people have disappeared without explanation over the last decade? There was frantic typing on her end, then, oh my God. Jonathan, there's a pattern. Every 3 years, almost to the day. Groups of people, always between 30 and 40, vanish without a trace. It goes back decades. The last one was 3 years ago, I finished. Right around when I started on the night shift. I'd heard about it. 37 people disappeared over the course of a single night. No connection between them, no bodies ever found. It had been big news for a week, then forgotten. Another person walked past me toward the door. Only about half the original group remained. Martinez still stood frozen, but I could see his eyes starting to track towards the stage. They're going to take them all, I said into the radio. Then, louder, to whatever was listening. Why? Why these people? The harmonics returned. Every system requires maintenance. Every city generates excess psychic energy. Fear, hope, despair, joy. Without collection, it builds up, becomes toxic, manifests in ways your kind cannot control. We prevent catastrophe by removing those most sensitive to these energies. You're saying you're helping us? We are maintaining balance. Your friend at Grandview, the family you encountered. They exist because the energy was not properly harvested. They are the residue of uncollected trauma. Would you prefer more such incidents? I thought about the Morrison family, forever dying, forever suffering. There has to be another way. There is no other way. The collection must be completed. More people were moving now, forming a line toward the door. Martinez took a step forward. No! I lunged for him, tackling him to the ground. This time, he fell, but immediately began struggling to get up, to return to the line. His strength was incredible, beyond human. Do not interfere, the harmonics warned. You cannot stop this. You can only make it worse. I'm not letting you take these people. That's when I heard the sirens. My backup was arriving. 3 patrol cars screeched into the parking lot, officers spilling out. I could hear them on the radio, Angela directing them to my location. The harmonics grew urgent. If they interfere, the door will destabilize. Everyone here will be lost, including you. Then close it, leave. The collection is not complete. We require 40 souls. Only 23 have passed through. The other officers were crashing through the trees now, flashlights bobbing in the darkness. I had seconds to make a decision. Let the collection continue and save 17 people, or risk losing everyone by interrupting it. I made a choice I still question to this day. "Everyone stop!" I shouted to the arriving officers. "Do not approach the stage. Set a perimeter, but do not interfere." "Pierce, what the hell is going on?" Sergeant Davis emerged from the trees, weapon drawn. "Trust me, Sarge. Please, just trust me. If we interfere now, we lose everyone." Davis looked at the scene. The frozen people, the impossible door, colleagues walking into nothing, and made a command decision. "You heard him. Perimeter only. Nobody moves without my order." We watched in horror as the remaining people walked one by one through the door. I kept hold of Martinez, physically restraining him even as he struggled. The other officers grabbed a few more, saving who we could, but most made it through before we could stop them. Finally, the harmonic spoke again. 36. Insufficient but acceptable. The deficit will be carried forward. The door began to close. As it did, the people we'd restrained suddenly went limp, like puppets with cut strings. Martinez gasped, his eyes clearing. "What? Where am I? Pierce?" The door shut with a sound like thunder. Then it simply ceased. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, leaving only empty air and the faint smell of ozone. The aftermath was chaos. 36 missing persons. No explanation. No bodies. No evidence except for 47 witnesses, the ones we'd saved, who all reported the same thing. They'd heard a call, a voice in their heads telling them they were needed, that they had to come to the park. They couldn't resist it. The official report called it a mass hysteria event, possibly triggered by contaminated water or a gas leak. The real reports, the ones that told the truth, were sealed. The families of the missing were told their loved ones had likely been victims of a cult suicide, bodies hidden somewhere they'd never be found. But I knew the truth, and worse, I knew it would happen again. Angela found more patterns in the data. Not just the 3-year collection cycle, but smaller incidents. Individual disappearances that clustered around certain locations. Deaths that didn't make sense. And always, those impossible phone calls from numbers that didn't exist. "It's like the city is alive," she told me during a late-night conversation a week after Riverside. "Like it has an immune system, and we're the white blood cells. But there are things here that are bigger than us, older than us, things that see the city in ways we can't." She was right, but understanding that didn't make it easier to accept. How do you protect and serve when the threats aren't criminals or accidents, but fundamental forces you can barely comprehend? I started keeping a journal, documenting everything strange I encountered. The patterns became clearer over time. The collectors weren't the only things operating in our city. There were other forces, other entities, all maintaining their own version of balance. Martinez quit the force 3 months after Riverside. He said he couldn't handle not knowing if his thoughts were his own anymore. I understood, but I couldn't quit. Someone had to stand watch. Someone had to be there when the next impossible thing happened. Because it would happen. The deficit would need to be paid. In 3 years, the collectors would return, and this time they'd need more than 40. They'd need to make up for the ones we'd saved. I had 3 years to figure out how to stop them, or at least how to minimize the damage. 3 years to understand the hidden rules that governed our city's dark underbelly. 3 years to prepare for a confrontation with forces that operated outside normal reality. But first, I had to survive the night shift. Because the collectors were just one threat among many, and every call could be the one that pulled me into something I couldn't escape from. The city had shown me its true face, and there was no going back to ignorance. Some nights I envied the Morrison family. At least their loop had an end, even if it repeated forever. Those of us who'd seen behind the veil had to keep walking forward into an increasingly strange and dangerous world, knowing that every shift might be our last. Every call might be the one that collected us. But someone had to answer those calls. Someone had to stand between the normal world and the nightmare underneath. And until I found someone else who could handle the truth, that someone was me. 6 months after Riverside Park, I thought I'd mapped out most of the strangeness in our city. I had my journal full of patterns. Angela had her database of impossible calls, and between us we developed a system for identifying and responding to paranormal incidents. We were wrong to think we understood anything. It was a Thursday night in February, bitter cold with snow threatening. I was parked under an overpass watching for drunk drivers when Angela's voice cut through the static with barely controlled panic. All units. Officers down at the Brightwater subway station. Multiple officers reporting. They're saying the tunnel is wrong. Requesting immediate backup. Brightwater was an abandoned subway station on the Blue Line, closed since 1987 after a structural collapse killed 13 people. The city had sealed it, but urban explorers broke in regularly. We'd arrested dozens of them over the years. Unit 23 responding, I called in, already driving. Angela, what do you mean the tunnel is wrong? I don't know. Unit 15 and Unit 8 went in to clear out some trespassers. Now they're saying the tunnel goes somewhere it shouldn't. Jonathan, they sound terrified. I'd never heard Angela describe other officers as terrified. Angry, frustrated, confused, sure. But terrified? That was new. The entrance to Brightwater was in an industrial area, hidden behind a chain-link fence that had been cut and repaired so many times it was more patch than original. 3 patrol cars were already there, lights flashing, doors open. But no officers were visible. Dispatch, I'm on scene. No visual on Units 15, 8, or... I checked the car numbers. Looks like Unit 22 is here too. Unit 22 went in 5 minutes ago to assist. They're not responding now either. 3 units down. That meant 6 officers were somewhere in that abandoned station. I grabbed my gear, including extra flashlights and flares. Something told me I'd need all the light I could get. The fence had been cut again, recently. The opening was large enough to drive a car through. Beyond it, the old station entrance yawned like a mouth. Stairs descending into darkness. The official, danger. Keep out. Signs had been spray-painted over with symbols I didn't recognize. Not gang tags, something older looking, almost runic. I descended the stairs, my flashlight beam revealing the detritus of decades. Newspapers, bottles, rat droppings, but also fresh footprints, lots of them. More than 6 officers' worth. The platform was a time capsule from the 80s. Faded advertisements for long-dead businesses. A route map showing stations that no longer existed. Benches where countless commuters had waited for trains that stopped coming 40 years ago. "Hello?" I called out. "This is Officer Pierce. Can anyone hear me?" My voice echoed strangely. Not the sharp echo you'd expect from a concrete tunnel, but something softer, longer, like the space was much larger than it should be. I saw the lights first, flashlight beams in the tunnel to my left, moving erratically. I jogged toward them and found Officers Miller and Brooks from Unit 15, standing at the tunnel mouth, staring into the darkness. "Miller, Brooks, what's the situation?" They turned to look at me, and I saw naked fear in their eyes. Miller, a 20-year veteran who'd seen everything, was actually shaking. "Pierce, the tunnel, it's not right." "What do you mean?" "Look for yourself." I stepped past them and shone my light into the tunnel. For a moment, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then my brain processed it and I had to grab the wall to steady myself. The tunnel went on too far. Way too far. The Brightwater tunnel should have extended maybe 300 feet before hitting the collapse site. But my flashlight beam didn't find an end. The tunnel just kept going, disappearing into darkness that seemed to swallow light. And there were tracks that shouldn't exist. The old tracks were still there, rusted and broken, but beside them were new tracks. Not new, as in recently installed, but new as in they looked like they'd been laid yesterday in 1950. They gleamed in my flashlight beam, pristine and impossible. "Where are the others?" I asked. "They went in," Brooks said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Baxter and Rodriguez from Unit 8, they went after the trespassers. We heard them on the radio saying the tunnel was wrong. Then they kept going. Said they could hear a train." "A train? There haven't been trains here for..." A sound cut me off. From deep in the tunnel came the unmistakable sound of a train whistle. But it wasn't modern. It was a steam whistle. The kind that hadn't been used in the city since the 1960s. "Thompson and Jones went in after them," Miller continued. "That was 10 minutes ago. We can still hear them on the radio sometimes, but..." He held up his radio. Through the static I could hear voices, but they weren't speaking English. It sounded like dozens of languages all at once, overlapping, as if multiple conversations from different times were bleeding through. I made a decision. "You two stay here. I'm going in. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, seal this entrance and don't let anyone else in." "Pierce, that's suicide," Miller said. "Maybe, but we've got 4 officers in there." I entered the tunnel. The change was immediate. The air was different. Not stale like you'd expect in an abandoned tunnel, but fresh, with a strange metallic taste. My footsteps echoed wrong, sometimes sounding like they were on concrete, sometimes on wood, sometimes on something else entirely. About 100 feet in, I found the first impossibility. A side tunnel that absolutely should not exist. My flashlight revealed it extending perpendicular to the main tunnel, with different architecture. Older, brick instead of concrete, with gas lamp fixtures on the walls that were somehow still burning. I marked the entrance with spray paint and kept going. 200 feet. Another side tunnel, this one ultra-modern, with LED strips and pristine white walls. Through it, I could hear music. Jazz, but not from any era I recognized. 300 feet. This should have been the collapse site. Instead, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber, easily the size of a football field. Multiple tunnel mouths opened onto it from different levels, creating a 3-dimensional maze. Some tunnels looked ancient, carved from stone. Others were clearly from different decades of subway construction. One appeared to be made entirely of glass. And there were trains. Not dead. Abandoned trains. Moving trains. They emerged from tunnels, crossed the chamber on tracks that defied physics, some running along the walls, some suspended in midair, and disappeared into other tunnels. I saw steam engines from the 1800s. Subway cars from the 1970s. Sleek things that looked like they were from a science fiction movie. But the passengers. Every train was full of passengers, but they weren't right. Some were translucent, like ghosts. Others were too solid, like they were more real than reality. Some were clearly from different time periods. Victorian ladies sitting next to punk rockers sitting next to people in clothes I didn't recognize. Fashion that hadn't been invented yet. And in the center of it all, on a platform that shouldn't exist, were the 4 missing officers. They were standing in a circle, apparently arguing with someone I couldn't see. As I got closer, I could hear Thompson's voice. "We're not getting on any of your trains. We need to get back." A voice responded, cultured and smooth, but with an undertone that made my skin crawl. Officers, please understand. You've entered the Grand Central Station. All stations, all times, all places. You can't simply leave. You must take a train. We're not taking any damn train. That was Baxter, his hand on his weapon. I reached the platform using a rusted maintenance ladder. As I climbed up, the voice spoke again, and now I could see its source. A man in a conductor's uniform. But the uniform kept changing. One moment it was from the 1920s, the next from the 1980s, the next from some era I couldn't place. Ah, another officer. 5 of you now. That's enough for a special charter. Who are you? I demanded. I'm the conductor. I've been the conductor since the first rail was laid, and I'll be the conductor until the last train stops. This is my station, Officer Pierce. He knew my name. Of course he did. This place shouldn't exist. Shouldn't it? Every city with a subway system has one. A place where all the tunnels meet, where all the trains that ever were and ever will be pass through. Most people never find it. But sometimes, when the boundaries wear thin, when someone digs where they shouldn't or opens a door that should stay closed, the trespassers, where are they? The conductor smiled, and his face shifted through different ages. Young, old, ancient, not quite human. They took a train, of course, the 11:15 to 1962. They wanted to explore abandoned places. Well, they'll get to explore a New York that won't exist for another 20 years from their perspective. If they're lucky, they'll find their way back in a decade or two of subjective time. Bring them back. I can't. They chose their train. That's the rule. Everyone who enters must choose a train. Even you. We're not choosing anything. We're leaving. You can't. Look. He pointed behind us. The tunnel we'd come through was gone. In its place was a solid brick wall with a faded poster advertising a circus from 1943. The other officers spun around, panic setting in. Jones actually drew his weapon, pointing it at the conductor. Bring the tunnel back. The conductor laughed, a sound like train wheels on tracks. I don't control the tunnels, officer. The station does. And the station says you must choose. There are trains to everywhere, every when. Past, future, parallel presence. Worlds where the subway never stopped running. Worlds where it was never built. Choose wisely. This is insane, Rodriguez said. Yes, the conductor agreed. Sanity is a luxury the Grand Central Station doesn't offer. But I'll make you a deal, since you're public servants and all. There's one train that goes back to your present, your exact timeline, the 3:33 to today. But it only runs once, and it's leaving in... He checked a pocket watch that showed impossible time, with 13 hours and symbols instead of numbers. 7 minutes. Where? I asked. He pointed to a platform on the far side of the chamber, accessible only by a narrow walkway that passed over and under multiple track lines. Platform 13, naturally. We ran. The journey across that chamber was the longest 7 minutes of my life. We had to dodge trains that materialized out of nowhere, duck under bridges that shifted and changed, leap over gaps that opened in the walkway. All around us, the impossible trains thundered by, their passengers watching us with eyes that had seen too much or too little. 3 minutes in, Jones slipped. He would have fallen onto a track where a steam engine was bearing down, but Thompson grabbed him, pulling him back just as the train roared past. The passengers in that train were all children, but their faces were ancient. 5 minutes. We reached a vertical shaft with a ladder. As we climbed, the metal rungs kept changing. Iron, steel, aluminum, something that felt organic. Below us, above us, trains passed through the shaft at impossible angles. 6 minutes. Platform 13 was in sight. It looked normal. Blessedly normal, just a regular subway platform. But standing on it was our train, and it was wrong in a different way. It was every train at once. The front car was from the 1920s, the second from the 1950s, the third from the 1980s, and so on. The last car didn't quite exist yet, flickering in and out of reality. 7 minutes. We made it to the platform just as the doors began to close. We dove through, all 5 of us tumbling into a car that couldn't decide what decade it was from. The seats morphed and changed. The advertisements on the walls cycled through 100 years of products. The conductor appeared in the doorway between cars. "Remember, officers, you've ridden the Grand Central Station. You can never truly leave. You'll see its entrances everywhere now. In every abandoned tunnel, every closed door, every place where tracks once ran. Try not to look too closely." The train lurched into motion. Through the windows, I saw the impossible chamber receding, shrinking, folding in on itself. Then darkness, then we were in the Brightwater Tunnel. The normal, collapsed, absolutely right-sized Brightwater Tunnel. Miller and were there, weapons drawn, shouting at us. We'd been gone for 3 hours, though it had felt like minutes. The trespassers were never found. Officially, they were listed as missing persons, probably runaways. The incident was buried in paperwork, classified as a gas leak causing hallucinations. But all 5 of us who rode that train, we knew the truth, and the conductor was right. We see the entrances everywhere now, every abandoned station, every closed-off tunnel, every place where the city's transportation infrastructure touches the impossible. Sometimes I glimpse trains that shouldn't exist. Sometimes I hear that steam whistle in the distance. Thompson quit the force entirely, moved to a landlocked state with no subways. Jones transferred to day shift. Baxter and Rodriguez still work nights, but they refuse to go anywhere near train tracks. Me, I keep working, keep watching, because someone needs to know about these places. Someone needs to warn people away from the entrances to the Grand Central Station. And someone needs to be there when inevitably someone else finds their way in. Angela added a new protocol to dispatch. Any call involving abandoned subway infrastructure gets special attention. We've prevented 17 incidents in the last 6 months, turning explorers away before they could find the doors that should stay closed. But late at night, when the city is quiet, I can hear them. The ghost trains running through tunnels that don't exist, carrying passengers to destinations that never were. And sometimes, just sometimes, I hear the conductor's voice on the wind. All aboard. Everything I'd experienced, Grandview, Riverside Park, the Grand Central Station, had been preparing me for this night. The night when all the impossible things would converge, when I'd finally understand why I'd been witnessing these events, why certain officers could see through the veil while others remained blissfully ignorant. It was December 21st, the winter solstice, though I didn't realize the significance of that until later. I was 2 hours into my shift when Angela's voice came through the radio, but something was different. She sounded distant, hollow. Unit 23, respond to... She paused, and I heard papers rustling. I don't have an address, that's odd. The system says there's a call, but no location. Angela, you okay? The phone's ringing, but we already answered it. Jonathan, all the phones are ringing, every line all at once. I could hear it in the background, a cacophony of ringtones growing louder. Then Angela gasped. They're all the same number. The one from Grandview, from Riverside. Jonathan, it's calling from inside the dispatch center. My blood went cold. I was already turning my patrol car around, heading for the dispatch center when my own phone rang. I shouldn't have answered it while driving, but I knew, somehow I just knew, that this call was meant for me. Officer Pierce. The voice was familiar, but wrong, like multiple people I knew speaking in unison. It's time you understood. Who is this? We are everyone who's ever disappeared. Everyone who's walked through doors that shouldn't exist. Everyone who's answered calls that couldn't be real. We are the collected, the transported, the transformed. And tonight, the barriers collapse. The line went dead. My radio burst to life with multiple voices. Every officer on night shift, all reporting the same thing. They were getting calls directing them to different locations across the city. Each location was one I recognized from my journal. Sites of previous incidents. Places where reality was thin. All units, do not respond to those locations, I shouted into the radio. This is Unit 23. Those calls are not legitimate. Do not, but I could already hear the confirmations. Units were responding, drawn by some compulsion they couldn't resist. Just like the people at Riverside Park, just like Martinez at the amphitheater. I reached the dispatch center, a nondescript building in the government district. The lights were all on, but they were wrong. Too bright, pulsing in a rhythm like a heartbeat. Through the windows, I could see Angela and the other dispatchers at their stations, but they weren't moving. They were frozen, hands on keyboards, headsets on, staring at screens that showed impossible things. I burst through the door and immediately felt it. That same mental pull I'd experienced at Riverside, but stronger. Every phone in the center was indeed ringing, all showing the same impossible number. And on every computer screen was a map of the city, but not the city as it existed. This showed all the hidden places, all the impossible spaces. The Grand Central Station sprawled beneath downtown like a cancer. Doors that shouldn't exist dotted every neighborhood. And at the center of it all, pulsing like a heart, was Grandview Apartments. But Grandview had been demolished. I'd watched them tear it down. Angela turned to look at me, and her eyes were solid black. When she spoke, it was in that same collective voice. The building was just matter. What happened there, what the Morrison family became, that was the seed. Tonight it blooms. Angela, fight it. She can't hear you. None of them can. They're all answering the call now. Every sensitive, every person who's glimpsed the truth, every officer who's responded to an impossible incident. The city is collecting itself. I backed toward the door, but it slammed shut. The locks engaged with a definitive click. You're the last one, Pierce. The one who's seen it all but never been taken. You're the witness. You need to see what happens next. The screens changed, showing feeds from across the city. I watched in horror as patrol cars converged on locations that shouldn't exist. Officers walked into buildings that had been demolished, descended into tunnels that had been sealed, entered doors that opened onto nothing. Why? I asked. What's the point of all this? Every city is alive, Pierce. It has a consciousness, built from the collective experiences of everyone who's ever lived there. But sometimes that consciousness gets sick. Traumatic events, mass suffering, repeated patterns of pain. They create infections. The Morrison family, burning forever. The collectors, harvesting psychic energy. The Grand Central Station, where all possibilities converge. The screens shifted again, showing me something impossible. The city from above, but not just the physical city. I could see layers of reality stacked on top of each other. The city as it was in the 1920s, the 1950s, the 1980s, all existing simultaneously. And in between those layers, dark spaces where things that shouldn't exist had taken root. Tonight, we cure the infection. We collect all the fragments, all the corrupted pieces, all the people who've been touched by the impossibility. We concentrate them in one place and burn them out. You're going to kill them? No. We're going to transform them, make them part of the city's immune system instead of victims of its disease. They'll become like us, Watchers, guardians, maintaining the barriers between what is and what shouldn't be. I thought about all the officers responding to those calls, drawn by a compulsion they couldn't resist. Good people who just wanted to help, now being pulled into something beyond their understanding. There has to be another way. This is the other way. The Morrison family showed us what happens when trauma isn't processed. They're stuck in an eternal loop of suffering. The collectors showed us what happens when the city's psychic energy isn't managed. It builds up until it attracts predators from outside reality. The Grand Central Station showed us what happens when boundaries break down completely. Every train, every timeline, every possibility bleeding into each other. The room began to change. The walls became translucent, and I could see through them to other versions of the dispatch center. In one, it was still the 1960s, operators plugging cables into switchboards. In another, it was some future version with technology I didn't recognize. All of them overlapping, existing in the same space. Choose, Pierce. Join us willingly, become part of the solution, or resist and become another problem to be solved. I thought about my options. I could fight, probably die, certainly fail to save anyone. Or I could accept, become part of whatever this collective consciousness was, maybe have some influence over what happened next. But then I remembered something the conductor had said. Everyone who enters must choose a train. This was just another train, another choice being forced on me. And I'd learned something important from all these encounters. The impossible things had rules. They had to have rules, or they couldn't exist in our reality at all. You need consent, I said. That's why the calls, the compulsion. You can influence but not force. People have to choose to answer, choose to walk through the doors, choose to get on the trains. The collective voice was silent for a moment, then, yes. Then I choose neither. I don't join you, and I don't resist. I witness. That's what you said I was, right? The witness? The room flickered. Angela blinked, and for a moment her eyes were normal. She mouthed one word, run. I didn't need to be told twice. I threw my shoulder into the door, and this time it gave way. I burst out into the night to find the city transformed. The sky was wrong. Instead of darkness, it showed all times at once. Noon sun and midnight stars, dawn and dusk bleeding into each other. Buildings phased in and out of existence, showing their past and future states. Streets that had been rerouted decades ago suddenly existed alongside their modern counterparts. And everywhere, people were walking. Not just officers. Civilians, too. All moving in the same direction, toward downtown, toward where Grandview had stood. I got in my patrol car and drove against the flow of sleepwalkers. The radio was chaos. Automated emergency broadcasts, fragments of dispatches from different decades. Voices I recognized calling for help from times that had already passed or hadn't happened yet. I reached the site of the old Grandview apartments and found exactly what I'd feared. The building was there, but not there. It existed in a state of superposition, simultaneously new, aged, burning, demolished, rebuilt. And at its heart, on the third floor, I could see the Morrison family. But they weren't alone. Every traumatic event that had ever happened in the building was occurring at once. All the pain and fear and death creating a vortex of suffering that was pulling in everyone who'd been touched by the city's impossibilities. Officers were walking into the building and not coming out. Each one who entered made the vortex stronger, the building more real. Soon it would solidify, become a permanent wound in reality, a place where all the city's trauma would be concentrated. I had to stop it. But how do you stop something that exists outside normal causality? Then I remembered Dr. Morrison from Cypress Street. She'd said something about the city developing antibodies. What if that's what I was? Not someone meant to join the collective, but someone meant to resist it. I grabbed my radio, switching to all channels. "This is Officer Pierce. If anyone can hear me, if anyone is still themselves, don't go into the building. The calls aren't real. The compulsion isn't you. Fight it." Static, then one voice. Angela, somehow breaking through. "Jonathan, the phone number. It's not calling us. We're calling it." Of course. The impossible number wasn't reaching out. We were reaching in, our collective trauma and fear creating a feedback loop that manifested as these calls. The city wasn't sick. We were making it sick. I ran toward the building, but not to enter it. Instead, I went to every officer I could find, physically restraining them, breaking their walking trance. Some snapped out of it immediately. Others fought me. But each one I saved weakened the pull. "Help me!" I shouted to the ones who'd awakened. "We need to stop people from entering." It became a battle. Those of us who were free trying to save those who were entranced. The building flickered more violently, struggling to maintain its existence. The Morrison family appeared at the window, but now I understood. They weren't trapped. They were the trap, the bait that drew in suffering souls. Then Martinez appeared. I hadn't seen him since he'd quit after Riverside. He was in civilian clothes, but his eyes were clear. "Pierce, the pattern's breaking. Whatever you're doing, it's working." More people were snapping out of it. The collective's hold was weakening. The building began to fade, becoming translucent. Through it, I could see the empty lot where it had been demolished, reality reasserting itself. But the collective voice boomed from everywhere at once. "You don't understand what you're doing. Without us, without the collection, the pressure will build until..." It cut off. The building vanished. Everyone who'd been entranced suddenly collapsed, unconscious but breathing. The sky returned to normal. The impossible phone calls stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard sirens. Real sirens from real emergency vehicles responding to a real crisis. Within minutes, the area was flooded with ambulances, fire trucks, legitimate police units. The official story was a gas leak causing mass hallucinations. The unconscious were treated and released, most with no memory of the event. The officers who remembered were quietly reassigned or encouraged to take early retirement. But Angela and I knew the truth. We'd broken the pattern, refused the collection, and in doing so, we'd changed something fundamental about how the city handled its impossible spaces. The calls still come, but now we know what they are. Not external forces trying to control us, but manifestations of our own collective unconscious. The Grand Central Station still exists, but the conductor no longer insists everyone must choose a train. The collectors haven't returned, the 3-year cycle broken. Some nights are stranger than others. We still get reports of impossible things, places that shouldn't exist, people seeing what can't be real. But now we handle them differently. Instead of responding with fear, we respond with understanding. Instead of being collected by the impossibility, we collect ourselves. Angela created a new protocol. When the impossible calls come, we don't answer them. We let them ring out, let the trauma dissipate instead of feeding it with our attention. It's not perfect. Sometimes real emergencies get missed. But it's better than the alternative. I still work the night shift, still patrol the thin spaces between real and unreal. But now I'm not just a witness. I'm a guardian, standing watch not against the impossible, but alongside it. Because the impossible isn't the enemy. It's just another part of the city, as real as the streets and buildings and people. The Morrison family is finally at rest. The last time I drove by the empty lot where Grandview stood, I saw them, not trapped in their burning loop, but standing peacefully, watching the sunrise they'd never gotten to see. They waved at me before fading away for the last time. Martinez came back to the force. He works day shift, but sometimes we meet for coffee at dawn, trading stories about the things we've seen. He says the city feels different now, lighter somehow. I agree. The truth is, every city is haunted. Every place where humans gather and live and die becomes a repository of their experiences. Most people never see it, never feel the weight of accumulated history pressing down on the present. But some of us do. Some of us answer the midnight calls and walk the impossible streets and stand guard at the doors that shouldn't exist. We're the night shift. We keep watch in the dark hours when reality wears thin. Not to fight the darkness, but to understand it, to keep it in balance with the light. Because a city without shadows isn't a city at all. It's just a collection of buildings pretending to be alive. And our city is very much alive. It breathes, it dreams, it remembers. And sometimes on the coldest, darkest nights, it calls out for help. When it does, we answer, not because we have to, but because someone needs to. The phone is ringing now, that impossible number flashing on the screen. Angela looks at me, questioning. I shake my head, let it ring. Some calls aren't meant to be answered. They're meant to remind us that we're still here, still watching, still choosing to stand between the normal and the impossible. When the call came in, it was 11:50 p.m. on an October night. I had been training Patrick O'Neill for 3 weeks. I was showing him my experiences and the finer points of night patrols in the rural areas outside the city, where farmland and forests meet. The kid was inexperienced, but I could see the enthusiasm in his eyes. He was fresh out of the academy and possessed that endless energy and high self-confidence combination unique to rookies. Unit 17, we've got a report of an abandoned vehicle on the old Garrett Bridge. Dispatch crackled through our radio. Caller says it's been there for at least 2 hours. Hazard lights on, no driver visible. I picked up the radio while Patrick navigated our patrol car down the dark country road. Copy that, dispatch. We're about 15 minutes out. Any missing vehicle reports matching the description? Negative, Unit 17. Caller described it as a white panel van, commercial type. No plates visible from their vantage point. Patrick glanced at me as he drove. The Garrett Bridge? Isn't that the one that's been closed for repairs? Supposed to be, I said, watching the darkness outside roll by. Been closed for 6 months now. Only locals know you can still cross it if you move the barriers. I'd been a cop for 18 years, 12 of those on night shift. You develop instincts about calls, a sixth sense for when something's going to be more than it appears. This felt like one of those times. An abandoned vehicle on a closed bridge in the middle of nowhere, discovered by someone who shouldn't have been there either. It had all the markings of trouble. The Garrett Bridge had been built in the 1950s, a 2-lane steel truss bridge spanning the Blackwater River about 20 miles outside the city limits. The state had been planning to demolish and replace it for years, but budget issues kept pushing the project back. In the meantime, they'd officially closed it for safety reasons, though the structure was still sound enough for light traffic. As we approached the bridge, our headlights swept across the orange and white barriers that were supposed to block access. They'd been moved aside, just enough for a vehicle to squeeze through. Beyond them, barely visible in the darkness, was the white van. "There it is," Patrick said, slowing our patrol car to a stop about 50 feet from the vehicle. The van was parked at an odd angle. Front wheels turned sharply to the left as if the driver had stopped suddenly. The hazard lights were indeed flashing, creating an eerie strobe effect in the darkness. No other vehicles were visible, and the silence was complete except for the distant sound of the river below. "Run the plates," I told Patrick as I stepped out of our car. I approached the van slowly, hand resting on my weapon, flashlight beam sweeping the vehicle. The driver's door was open about 6 inches, interior light off. As I got closer, I could see dark stains on the door handle and running down the side of the van. "Stephen?" Patrick called from our car, his voice tight. "Plates come back to a rental company. Rented 3 days ago to a Michael Harrison, address in the city. Call it in, request backup, and run Harrison's name." I reached the van and used my flashlight to push the door fully open. The smell hit me immediately. Copper and iron. Blood. A lot of it. The driver's seat was soaked, and there were arterial spray patterns on the windshield. But no body. "Jesus," Patrick said, appearing beside me. He'd forgotten protocol, left the patrol car without me clearing the scene first. But I couldn't blame him. The amount of blood was shocking. "This is fresh," I said, touching the edge of a blood pool with my gloved finger. "Maybe 2-3 hours old. Where's the driver?" I swept my flashlight around the bridge. Blood drops led from the van toward the railing on the east side. We followed them, and that's when we found the first piece of evidence that this was more than just an accident or suicide. Scattered on the ground near the railing were various items: a wallet, a cell phone with a cracked screen, a set of keys, and what looked like small plastic bags with white residue. Drug paraphernalia. "Shit," Patrick muttered. "Drug deal gone bad? Maybe." But something felt off. The blood trail didn't go over the railing. It went along it toward the north end of the bridge. And there were other marks in the blood. Drag marks like something heavy had been pulled through it. "Patrick, go back to the car. Call for K9 units and crime scene techs. And keep your eyes open. Whoever did this might still be around." He jogged back to our patrol car while I continued following the blood trail. It led me to a maintenance access door built into the bridge's structure. The door was slightly ajar, more blood smeared on its handle. I should have waited for backup. That would have been the smart play. But there was so much blood, and if someone was still alive in there, minutes could matter. I pushed the door open with my flashlight and peered inside. The maintenance corridor was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. Metal grating formed the floor, and through it I could hear the river rushing below. The blood trail continued into the darkness, and there were other stains on the walls. Handprints, like someone had been trying to steady themselves or pull themselves along. I entered the corridor, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. About 20 feet in, I found more scattered items: a jacket, torn and bloody, a shoe, and something that made my blood run cold: a police badge. Not from our department, but from the city. Badge number 4827. "Patrick," I called into my radio. "Run, badge number 4827, City PD." His response came back quickly. "That's Stephen. That's Officer James Moretti. He's been missing for 2 days. Failed to report for his shift. Family filed a missing persons report." A missing cop, a bloody van, drug paraphernalia, and a bridge that was supposed to be closed. The pieces were forming a picture I didn't like. I continued deeper into the maintenance corridor. The blood trail was getting thicker, and now there were other fluids mixed in. The smell was overwhelming. At the end of the corridor, another door led to a ladder that descended to a lower maintenance level. The blood trail went down. I started down the ladder, each rung slick with blood. Below, I could hear something. A rhythmic sound, like breathing but too regular, too mechanical. As I reached the bottom, my flashlight revealed a small maintenance room filled with old equipment and something else. Bodies. 3 of them. 2 were clearly dead, their throats cut, positioned sitting against the wall like they were just resting. The 3rd was Officer Moretti, and he was still alive, barely. He'd been stabbed multiple times in the torso and was trying to hold his intestines in with his hands. His eyes found mine, wide with pain and fear. "Help," he gasped. "Please." I rushed to him, keying my radio. "Officer down, I need medical immediately. Lower maintenance level of the Garrett Bridge. Multiple casualties." Patrick's panicked voice came back. "Stephen, I've got movement up here. Someone just came out of the woods, multiple someones. How many?" "I count 6, maybe 7. They're surrounding the patrol car." Moretti grabbed my arm with a bloody hand. "Trap," he whispered. "It's a trap. They knew you'd come." "Who? Who knew?" "The network. They've been using the bridge. Smuggling, I found out, tried to stop them." I could hear Patrick on the radio, his voice rising in panic. "Stephen, they've got weapons. They're demanding I get out of the car." "Do not exit the vehicle," I commanded. "Lock the doors. Call for immediate backup." But Moretti was shaking his head. "No backup coming. They have someone inside dispatch. They know every call, every unit. Why do you think this bridge is still accessible? They've been using it for months." The pieces clicked into place. The closed bridge that wasn't really closed. The drug paraphernalia, a missing cop who'd discovered the operation. And now we'd walked right into their cleanup operation. "Patrick, get out of there now. Drive back to..." The radio exploded with the sound of breaking glass and Patrick screaming. Then silence. I looked at Moretti. He was fading fast, his breathing shallow. "Go," he whispered. "Can't save me. Save your partner." I didn't want to leave him, but he was right. I could hear footsteps on the metal grating above us. They were coming down. I turned off my flashlight and moved in the darkness, using my memory of the layout to guide me. There was another exit from the maintenance room, a door that led to an external ladder down to the riverbank. I'd seen it on the bridge schematics during a training exercise years ago. I found the door and quietly opened it. The ladder was rusty and looked like it hadn't been used in years, but it held my weight. I descended as quickly and quietly as I could, hearing voices above me now, someone discovering Moretti. At the bottom, I was on a narrow concrete ledge just above the waterline. The river was high from recent rains, moving fast. I could either try to swim across or follow the ledge along the bridge supports. Neither option was good, but I needed to get back to Patrick. I chose the ledge, moving carefully in the darkness. Above, I could hear shouting, flashlight beams sweeping the water. They'd realized I'd escaped. My radio crackled with an unfamiliar voice. "Officer Foster, we know you're listening. Your partner is alive, for now. Come back up, and we can discuss this like civilized people." I didn't respond. Keep them guessing about my location. The ledge led me to one of the massive concrete pillars that supported the bridge. Built into it was another maintenance access, this one leading up through the pillar itself. I entered and began climbing the internal ladder, my legs burning with the effort. I emerged on the bridge deck about 100 feet from where we'd parked. In the distance, I could see our patrol car surrounded by figures. The windows were smashed, and Patrick was on the ground beside it, not moving. But I could see his chest rising and falling. Still alive. I needed a plan. 7 armed suspects, 1 injured partner, and me with just my service weapon and no backup coming. The smart move was to retreat, get to somewhere with cell signal, call in the cavalry. But that would mean leaving Patrick, and these people had already killed at least 2 people, probably 3 if Moretti didn't make it. Then I remembered something, the van. If it was a rental, it might have GPS tracking. And if these guys were using it for drug transport, there might be evidence inside that could help identify them. I circled back to the van, approaching from the blind side. The vehicle was empty, but in the back, I found what I was looking for. Packages of what looked like heroin, scales, and a ledger with dates, amounts, and initials. But more importantly, I found a burner phone that was still powered on. I scrolled through the recent calls. One number appeared repeatedly, including a call from just an hour ago. I dialed it. A voice answered immediately. "Is it done?" I stayed silent. "Harrison, is the cop situation handled?" Harrison, the name the van was rented under. I hung up and dialed 911, not our dispatch but the State Police emergency line. State Police emergency. This is Officer Stephen Foster, badge 11847, requesting immediate assistance at the Garrett Bridge. Multiple officers down, at least 7 armed suspects. Do not route through local dispatch, it's compromised. Understood, Officer Foster. Units responding. ETA 12 minutes. 12 minutes. I needed to keep Patrick alive for 12 minutes. I pocketed the phone and ledger, then grabbed one of the packages of heroin. An idea was forming. Dangerous, possibly stupid, but it might buy us time. I made my way back toward the group surrounding Patrick, but instead of approaching directly, I climbed onto one of the bridge's steel trusses. From there, I could see them clearly. 7 men, all armed, 2 standing over Patrick while the others swept the area with flashlights. I threw the heroin package as far as I could in the opposite direction from where I was hiding. It hit the bridge deck with a distinctive thud. "What was that?" one of them shouted. "Check it out," another ordered. 3 of them moved toward the sound. I threw another package, this time closer to the bridge's edge. Shit, that's the product. The cop must be throwing it in the river. That got all their attention. They scattered, searching for the supposed drugs being destroyed. In the confusion, I dropped down from the truss and sprinted to Patrick. He was conscious but badly beaten, his face swollen, blood running from a gash on his forehead. "Stephen," he mumbled through split lips, "I'm getting you out of here." I half carried, half dragged him toward our patrol car. The keys were still in it, engine running. I got him into the passenger seat and was climbing into the driver's side when one of the suspects spotted us. "They're at the car!" Gunfire erupted. The rear window exploded, showering us with glass. I started the car and floored it, tires screaming as we accelerated toward the bridge's exit. More gunfire. The side mirror disappeared. A tire blew out, but I kept driving, the car lurching and sparking as the rim hit the pavement. We made it off the bridge just as I heard the beautiful sound of sirens. Multiple sirens, coming fast. I pulled over, throwing the car into park, and covered Patrick with my body as the state police unit screamed past us toward the bridge. The radio crackled to life. Our dispatch, sounding panicked. All units, reports of shots fired at the Garrett Bridge. Units responding. Too late, the state police were already there. Within minutes, the night was filled with helicopters, searchlights, and the sounds of a massive police operation. Patrick and I were loaded into ambulances, and as they drove us away, I could see officers in tactical gear swarming the bridge. The aftermath was messy. 5 of the 7 suspects were arrested at the scene. 2 escaped but were caught within days. The investigation revealed a drug smuggling operation that had been using the closed bridge as a transfer point for months, paying off a dispatcher and 2 other officers to ensure no patrols came near it during their operations. Officer Moretti survived, barely. 6 months of recovery and physical therapy, but he made it. He'd stumbled onto the operation during an off-duty fishing trip and had been investigating on his own, not knowing who in the department he could trust. The dispatcher, a 10-year veteran named Lisa Conway, had been feeding information to the smugglers for 2 years. She'd routed patrols away from the bridge, deleted reports of suspicious activity, and warned them whenever an operation was planned in the area. She got 25 years. Patrick recovered fully, physically at least, but the experience changed him. The eager rookie energy was gone, replaced by a harder, more cautious approach to the job. He transferred to day shift 6 months later, said he'd had enough of what lurked in the darkness. Me? I stayed on nights. Someone has to. The Garrett Bridge was finally demolished last year. They built a new one, modern and well lit with cameras covering every angle. But sometimes when I drive past the spot where the old bridge stood, I remember that night. The blood, the darkness, the moment when I thought I'd lost my partner. I learned something important that night. The real danger isn't always what's in front of you. Sometimes it's the system itself, corrupted from within, using your trust against you. We'd responded to what seemed like a routine abandoned vehicle call, following procedure, trusting our dispatch, and walked right into a trap that had been months in the making. Now I verify everything. Every call, every piece of information, every assumption. Trust, but verify, especially on the night shift, where the darkness hides more than just crime. It hides betrayal, corruption, and the lengths people will go to for money. Patrick called me last week. He's a detective now, working white-collar crime. Safe, clean, far from bridges and blood. He thanked me for saving his life that night, but I told him the truth. We saved each other. That's what partners do. The drug network was dismantled. Millions in heroin seized, dozens arrested. The newspapers called it a major victory, but I know better. Cut off one route, and they'll find another. There's always another bridge, another closed road, another dispatcher willing to look the other way for the right price. That's why I stay on the night shift. Someone needs to watch the dark places, the closed bridges, the spots where the city's circulatory system can become infected. Someone needs to be there when the next call comes in that sounds routine, but feels wrong. Because it will come. It always does. 3 months after the Garrett Bridge incident, I was working solo again. Patrick's replacement had lasted exactly 2 weeks before requesting a transfer. Couldn't handle the isolation of rural night patrol. I didn't mind. After what happened with the drug network, I preferred working alone. Fewer variables to worry about, no one else to protect. It was a foggy Thursday night in January when I got the call that would reveal the Garrett Bridge incident had been just the tip of a very dark iceberg. Unit 17, we've got a situation, dispatch said. It was a new dispatcher, Rodriguez, brought in after the corruption scandal. Marine unit pulled a body from the Blackwater River. They're requesting a senior officer at the scene. Location: about 2 miles downstream from where the old Garrett Bridge was. There's something unusual about this one, Stephen. I knew the spot. The river curved there, creating a natural collection point for debris, and sometimes bodies. Over the years, we'd pulled 3 drowning victims from that exact location. On my way, what's unusual about it? Marine unit says the body has been prepared. They won't elaborate over radio. Prepared. That word sent a chill down my spine. The scene was controlled chaos when I arrived. 2 Marine unit boats with spotlights illuminated the riverbank, where crime scene techs were already setting up a perimeter. Detective Maria Santos was there, someone I'd worked with before and trusted. "Stephen," she called out, waving me over. "You need to see this." The body was laid out on a tarp on the riverbank. Male, mid-30s, wearing what looked like an expensive suit. But that wasn't the unusual part. The unusual part was that he'd been wrapped in clear plastic sheeting, vacuum sealed like a piece of meat for the freezer. Through the plastic, I could see his face perfectly preserved, eyes open, expression frozen in what looked like surprise. "Jesus," I muttered. "It gets worse," Maria said. "Look closer." I knelt beside the body. There was something in his mouth, visible through the plastic. a small card or piece of paper. "We haven't opened it yet," Maria explained. "Waiting for the ME, but there's more. This is the third body like this we've found in the past year, all pulled from different parts of the river, all wrapped the same way, all with something in their mouths. Third, why haven't I heard about this? Because the first two were found in different jurisdictions. It took the state police database to connect them. And Stephen," she paused, looking uncomfortable. "All three bodies were found downstream from bridges that were supposedly closed for maintenance." The blood drained from my face. The drug network used closed bridges as transfer points. "We know. That's why I called you specifically. You know this area. You broke up that smuggling ring. We think this might be connected." The medical examiner arrived and began carefully cutting through the plastic. The smell that escaped was wrong, not decay, but chemicals. Formaldehyde mixed with something else. "This body's been preserved," the ME said. "Professional job. He's been dead at least 2 weeks, but look at the tissue condition, near perfect preservation." He carefully extracted the card from the victim's mouth with tweezers. It was a playing card, the 3 of diamonds, with numbers written on it in neat handwriting. GPS coordinates. Maria was already pulling up the location on her phone. That's the old Riverside Bridge, closed 6 months ago for maintenance," I finished. "Son of a bitch. They're still using the closed bridges, aren't they?" "We need to check this out," Maria said. "Tonight, before whoever's doing this realizes we found the body." An hour later, Maria and I were approaching the Riverside Bridge with a full tactical team. Unlike the Garrett Bridge, this one was properly barricaded. Concrete barriers, chain-link fencing, official condemned structure signs. But as we got closer, our spotlights revealed something odd. Fresh tire tracks leading around the barriers, through what should have been impassable brush. "Someone's been here recently," the tactical team leader observed. "Within the last day or two." We followed the tracks and found a gap cut in the fence, concealed by strategically placed brush. Beyond it, the bridge looked abandoned, but I'd learned not to trust appearances. "Thermal imaging shows the bridge is clear," the tech specialist reported. "But I'm getting weird readings from below. Heat signatures, but dispersed, like multiple small sources." We entered the bridge structure through a maintenance door, weapons drawn, moving in tactical formation. The main deck was empty, but when we descended to the lower level, we found it. The space had been converted into a makeshift laboratory. Tables with chemical equipment, industrial freezers, and most disturbingly, 3 more bodies in various stages of the preservation process. But these weren't wrapped yet. They were suspended in tanks of fluid, like specimens. "What the hell is this?" Maria whispered. I approached one of the tanks. The body inside was perfectly preserved, looking almost alive except for the total stillness. There was a tag attached to the tank with information, date of acquisition, method of preservation, and a destination code. "They're shipping them," I said, realization dawning. "This isn't just murder. They're preserving and shipping bodies somewhere." Maria was examining a ledger on one of the tables. "According to this, they've processed over 20 bodies in the last 18 months. Different sources, different destinations, some international. Organ harvesting? No, the bodies are intact. This is something else." A sound from above made us all freeze. Footsteps on the bridge deck. Multiple sets, moving quickly. "We've got company," the team leader said. 4, maybe 5 individuals approaching from the north side. "Could be workers coming to check on their operation," I suggested. "Or could be cleanup crew who know we found the body," Maria countered. We took positions, waiting. The footsteps stopped directly above us. Then we heard voices, muffled but audible. Said the body surfaced, We need to clear everything tonight. What about the 3 in processing? Destroy them. Burn it all. We'll relocate to Site C. Maria looked at me. Site C. There was another location. The tactical team leader made the call. We move now before they can destroy evidence. We burst from concealment, officers flooding both ends of the bridge. The suspects, 4 men in dark clothing, tried to run, but were quickly surrounded. One managed to throw something over the bridge railing before being tackled. I saw it fall, a cell phone, probably with crucial data. I need a Marine unit, I called into my radio. Item thrown in the water, north side of Riverside Bridge. While the suspects were arrested and the scene secured, I studied the preservation setup more closely. This wasn't amateur work. The equipment was professional grade, the kind used in medical schools and research facilities. Whoever was running this operation had serious resources and expertise. Maria found more documents in a locked cabinet. Shipping manifests with international destinations. Payment records showing large sums transferred from offshore accounts, and most disturbing, a client list with coded names. "Stephen, look at this," she called me over. One manifest was different from the others, marked with red ink. Special order, must be fresh. Specific requirements: male, 25 to 35, athletic build, no diseases, no drug use, premium payment authorized. "They're taking orders," I said, horrified. "Someone's ordering specific types of bodies. But for what? If not organs, then what?" One of the arrested suspects, younger than the others, maybe 25, was looking increasingly panicked as we cataloged evidence. I approached him. "You're looking at multiple murder charges," I said. "Unless you want to tell us what this is really about." He looked at the others, then back at me. "I just maintain the equipment. I'm not involved in the acquisition." "Acquisition? You mean murder?" No. They're already dead when they get here. Natural causes. Accidents. Suicides. We just preserve them. For what purpose? He swallowed hard. Research. Private collectors. Some go to underground medical schools in countries where it's hard to get cadavers. Some to other clients. Other clients? I don't know details, but I heard them talking once about someone who wanted bodies for artistic purposes. Another who claimed to be conducting illegal medical experiments, and he hesitated. And? There's one client who insists the bodies be conscious when they die. Something about the chemicals released in the brain during the death process. They pay extra for those. My stomach turned. Are you saying some of these people were murdered to order? I don't know. I just run the preservation equipment. But sometimes, bodies would come in with specific death markers. Injection sites, ligature marks. I didn't ask questions. Maria had been listening. Where's Site C? I don't know. Only the bosses know all the sites. We operate in cells. The Marine unit radioed that they'd recovered the phone. Waterlogged, but possibly salvageable. Tech specialists would try to extract data from it. Over the next 12 hours, the investigation exploded. The preservation lab was just one node in a massive network operating across 3 states. Bodies were being harvested, preserved, and shipped for various illegal purposes. Some went to black market medical facilities, others to wealthy collectors with disturbing tastes. The coded client list was partially decrypted. One name made my blood run cold: the curator. According to the records, this client had purchased 15 bodies over 2 years, all with specific physical characteristics, all young, all preserved, using a special technique that maintained flexibility in the tissues. "We need to find this curator," Maria said. "Anyone ordering that many bodies has them somewhere." The investigation led us to an abandoned industrial complex 40 miles from the city. Satellite imagery showed heat signatures in buildings that were supposed to be empty. We assembled a joint task force, local police, state troopers, FBI. What we found there still haunts me. The main building had been converted into a grotesque gallery. The bodies were displayed in elaborate poses, dressed in period costumes, arranged in scenes depicting historical moments. The preservation technique had been so perfect that at first glance they looked like mannequins. It was only when you looked closely that you realized they were real human bodies. The curator turned out to be a wealthy recluse named Vincent Ashford, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune. He'd been creating what he called living history exhibitions for a select group of equally disturbed collectors. He had notebooks detailing his plans for future exhibitions, including something he called the Death of Caesar, that would require 23 specifically positioned bodies. Ashford was arrested at his mansion, seemingly unsurprised when we arrived. "You don't understand," he said as they cuffed him. "I'm preserving them, giving them purpose beyond their mundane deaths, their art now." The network unraveled piece by piece. 57 people were eventually arrested across 3 states. The body count was staggering, over 100 victims that we could confirm, possibly more that were never found. But what disturbed me most was learning how the network identified victims. They had people in hospitals, morgues, and funeral homes who would alert them when someone died who fit their criteria. But they also had spotters who would identify potential victims, homeless people, drug addicts, people who wouldn't be missed. Some of these people were marked for death, killed to fill specific orders. The young technician who'd cooperated got a reduced sentence in exchange for his testimony. He told us about one more site, one that hadn't been discovered. When we raided it, we found 7 people still alive, being held for future processing. They'd been kidnapped over the past month, kept sedated, waiting their turn to become part of someone's sick collection. The media coverage was intense but brief. The story was too horrific for sustained public attention. People didn't want to think about bodies being harvested and sold, about the existence of a market for preserved human remains, about the possibility that someone who died of apparently natural causes might end up in a collector's private gallery. But I couldn't forget. Every body pulled from the river, every missing persons report, every death that seemed slightly off. I wondered if it was connected to networks we hadn't found yet. Because if there was demand for preserved bodies, if people were willing to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for them, then there would always be someone willing to supply them. The bridges were the key. Isolated, often abandoned, perfect for conducting illegal activities away from prying eyes. Even after the network was dismantled, I made a point of checking every closed bridge in my patrol area regularly. More often than not, I found evidence of activity, not always criminal, but someone was using these spaces. 6 months later, I was checking the ruins of the Garrett Bridge site when I found something that made my blood run cold. Hidden in the brush near where the bridge had stood was a single playing card, the 3 of diamonds, with new GPS coordinates written on it. Someone was starting again. Or maybe they'd never really stopped. The GPS coordinates led me to the Millbrook Bridge, 27 miles north of the city in an area so rural that cell service was non-existent. The bridge had been closed for repairs for 3 months, but I'd learned that meant nothing. If anything, the closed bridges had become beacons for criminal activity, like lighthouses calling to ships in the darkness. I didn't go alone this time. After finding the playing card, I'd contacted Maria Santos directly, bypassing official channels. We'd both become paranoid after discovering how deep the corruption ran in the body preservation network. Trust was a luxury we couldn't afford. Another bridge, another nightmare, Maria said as we drove through the darkness in her unmarked car. We'd left our official vehicles behind, not wanting to announce our arrival. You know what bothers me most about this? What's that? The bridges were always the key, even before the drug network, before the body ring. How long have criminals been using these abandoned crossings? How much have we missed? It was 2 a.m. when we reached Millbrook Bridge. Unlike Garrett or Riverside, this one was older, built in the 1930s with Art Deco styling that had once been beautiful, but now looked Gothic in the foggy darkness. We parked a quarter-mile away and approached on foot. The bridge appeared deserted, but we'd learned not to trust appearances. We moved carefully, using night vision equipment Maria had borrowed from the evidence locker. Through the green-tinted world of the goggles, I could see fresh tire tracks, footprints, and something else. Cables running from the bridge into the surrounding forest. "Power lines," Maria whispered. "Someone's drawing electricity." We followed the cables, which led to a concealed junction box tapped into the rural power grid. From there, multiple lines ran back toward the bridge's support structure. Whatever was happening here required significant power. The entrance was hidden beneath the bridge, accessible via a rusted service ladder. As we descended, I could hear something. A low humming, like servers or cooling units. At the bottom, we found a door that shouldn't exist, newer than the bridge itself, installed recently with professional precision. It was locked with an electronic keypad. Maria pulled out a device I didn't recognize. "Where did you get that?" "Confiscated from the body ring. Figured it might come in handy." The device interfaced with the keypad, cycling through combinations rapidly. After 30 seconds, the lock clicked open. What we found inside defied explanation. The space beneath the bridge had been converted into a high-tech surveillance center. Dozens of monitors lined the walls, showing feeds from cameras positioned throughout the county. Not just traffic cameras or security feeds. These were hidden cameras in private places, homes, offices, hotel rooms, and on a central cluster of screens, live feeds from other bridges, including the sites of our previous investigations. "They've been watching us," Maria breathed. "This whole time, someone's been watching." But that wasn't the worst part. On one wall was a massive board with photos, documents, and string connecting various points. It was an investigation board, like something from our own department. But the subjects being investigated were police officers. My photo was there, along with Maria's and dozens of others. Under each photo were detailed notes about our habits, patrol routes, personal lives. "What the hell is this?" Maria asked. A voice from behind us answered. "Insurance." We spun around, weapons drawn. A man stood in the doorway, hands raised but showing no fear. He was older, maybe 60, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place in the humid space. "Officers Foster and Santos, I've been expecting you." "Hands where we can see them," I commanded. "Of course, I'm not armed. Violence isn't my method. Who are you?" "My name is Richard Thorne. I represent certain interests that have been inconvenienced by your recent activities. The body ring, the drug network?" He laughed. "Those were independent contractors, sloppy ones at that. No, I represent something far more established. We've been using these bridges for decades, long before those amateurs stumbled onto our infrastructure. Using them for what? Information, Officer Foster. The most valuable commodity in the modern world. This surveillance network is just one node in a system that spans the entire state. We monitor, we record, we catalog, and when necessary, we act on that information." "Blackmail," Maria said. "You're running a blackmail operation." "Such a crude term. We prefer information management." That judge who suddenly ruled in favor of a controversial development project. We had video of him in a compromising position. The prosecutor who dropped charges against a prominent businessman. We had evidence of her daughter's drug problem. Everyone has secrets, officers. We simply collect them. And the bridges? Perfect locations, isolated, abandoned, already equipped with infrastructure from their operational days. We've been retrofitting closed bridges for 20 years, creating a network of observation posts. The drug smugglers, the body traders, they were just tenants, paying us for the use of our spaces without knowing what else was happening there. I kept my weapon trained on him. You're under arrest. For what? Owning surveillance equipment? Having photos of public servants? You'll find nothing explicitly illegal here. We're very careful about that. The hidden cameras in private residences are illegal. Prove they're ours, prove we placed them. The feeds could be coming from anywhere, piggybacking on our system. Good luck making that case. Maria was moving toward the computers. Doesn't matter, we're shutting this down. I wouldn't do that, Thorne said calmly. Those systems are monitoring more than just people. We track shipments, deliveries, communications. Shut us down, and you'll blind yourself to a dozen criminal operations we've been documenting, including the new body preservation ring you've been hunting. That stopped us both. You know about the new ring? Of course. They started operating 2 months ago, using sites we abandoned. We've been watching them, gathering evidence. Would you like to know where they're keeping the bodies this time? It was a devil's bargain. Accept help from one criminal organization to catch another. Why would you help us? I asked. Because they're bad for business. Every time bodies surface, every time drugs are found, it brings attention to the bridges. We prefer to operate in shadow. These amateurs shine spotlights where we need darkness. Give us the information, and we'll consider no deals, Officer Foster. Either you accept our relationship as it is, or you get nothing. You can arrest me, destroy this facility, and the network will simply rebuild elsewhere. Or you can walk away with information that will save lives. Maria and I exchanged glances. We both knew we couldn't just walk away, but we also knew he was right about the legal complexities. Without warrants, without proper authorization, anything we found here would likely be thrown out in court. The information, Maria said finally. Give it to us. Thorne smiled and moved to one of the computers. The new preservation ring is operating from the abandoned meat packing plant. They've already processed 6 bodies. But here's what should really concern you. They have 3 living victims they're planning to process tomorrow night. He showed us surveillance footage from inside the plant. The images were clear. People in medical gear working on bodies, and in a separate room, 3 people bound and gagged, very much alive. Why tomorrow night? I asked. Because that's when their buyer arrives. Someone calling themselves the Collector. Not the same as the curator you arrested. This one has different tastes. They want to watch the preservation process happen. My stomach turned. Address. Thorne wrote it down, along with details about security, personnel, and timing. 12 hours, officers. That's how long those people have. We had no choice. We took the information and left, but not before Thorne gave us one final warning. We're everywhere, officers, every closed bridge, every abandoned building, every forgotten space in the urban infrastructure. We watch, we listen, we record. Remember that. Outside, Maria and I sat in her car, processing what we'd just learned. We can't let them continue, she said. We can't stop them without proof. The people at the meatpacking plant, we saved them. But Thorne and his network, that's a bigger problem. We called in the raid on the meatpacking plant, using the information Thorne had provided, but claiming it came from an anonymous tip. The raid was successful. 3 people saved, 4 arrested, bodies recovered. The new preservation ring was shut down before it could fully establish itself. But I couldn't stop thinking about Thorne's network. How many bridges were compromised? How many people were being watched without their knowledge? How deep did the surveillance go? I started my own investigation, off the books. I mapped every closed bridge in the state, cross-referencing with unusual activity reports, unexplained power usage, and missing persons cases. The pattern was clear. At least 30 bridges showed signs of modification. 3 months later, I was investigating one of these bridges alone when I found something that changed everything. Hidden in a maintenance panel was a hard drive containing thousands of hours of surveillance footage. But it wasn't just random civilians being watched. It was police operations, federal investigations, witness protection safe houses. They weren't just collecting blackmail material. They were selling intelligence to criminal organizations, helping them avoid law enforcement, warning them about raids and investigations. The body preservation ring, the drug network, they'd all been customers, paying for information that kept them one step ahead of us. I took the hard drive to the FBI, bypassing local channels entirely. The investigation that followed was massive but quiet. They couldn't move openly against Thorne's network without risking the escape of key players. Instead, they began a counter-surveillance operation, watching the watchers. It took 2 years, but eventually the network was dismantled. 47 people arrested across 5 states, including 3 judges, 2 prosecutors, and 5 police officials who'd been feeding information to Thorne in exchange for blackmail material on their enemies. Thorne himself was never caught. He vanished the night we raided the meatpacking plant, likely warned by someone inside law enforcement. The FBI believes he's operating somewhere else now, building a new network in abandoned infrastructure. The bridges were all properly demolished or sealed after that, their hidden spaces filled with concrete. But I know it's just a temporary solution. There's always another abandoned place, another forgotten corner of infrastructure where shadows can gather and watchers can work. I still patrol the rural routes, still check the places where bridges once stood. Sometimes I find evidence that someone's been there, fresh footprints, disturbed vegetation, the occasional playing card with GPS coordinates. I report them all, but I know we're playing an endless game of cat and mouse with people who've turned surveillance into an art form. Maria left law enforcement entirely, said she couldn't handle knowing that every moment might be watched, recorded, cataloged for future use. I understand her decision, but I stayed. Someone needs to watch the watchers, even if it's a battle we can never truly win. Because that's the real horror, not the drugs or the bodies or the violence. It's the knowledge that privacy is an illusion, that every secret is potentially currency, and that the infrastructure we abandon doesn't stay empty. It fills with shadows and secrets, with people who've learned that information is the ultimate weapon. The bridges are gone, but the network remains somewhere, watching and waiting for the next opportunity to rebuild. And I'll be watching too, waiting for the next playing card, the next set of coordinates, the next glimpse into the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of our everyday world. It's been 5 years since that first call to the Garrett Bridge. 5 years of uncovering horror after horror, each revelation showing me how deep the darkness really goes. I thought I'd seen it all. Drug networks, body traders, surveillance operations. I was wrong. The real truth was worse than anything I could have imagined. It started with Patrick O'Neill calling me at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. I hadn't heard from him in 2 years, not since he'd made detective. "Stephen, I need to see you. Off the record. It's about the bridges." We met at an all-night diner 30 miles outside the city, a place where neither of us would be recognized. Patrick looked haggard, like he hadn't slept in days. "I've been investigating financial crimes," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "Following money trails from various criminal organizations. Everything we've uncovered over the past 5 years. The drugs, the bodies, the surveillance. It all connects to one source of funding." I opened the folder: financial records, shell companies, wire transfers, and a name that made my blood run cold. The Bridge Authority. "That's impossible. The Bridge Authority is a legitimate state agency." "On paper, yes. But look closer." Patrick pointed to specific transactions. "Every bridge that's been closed for maintenance in the past 20 years has generated massive cash flows. Construction funds that disappear, maintenance budgets for bridges that are never actually repaired. The authority has been deliberately creating abandoned infrastructure for criminal organizations to use." "No, Stephen. They are the criminal organization. Everything else, the drug dealers, the body traders, even Thorne's surveillance network, they were just tenants. The Bridge Authority has been running the largest criminal enterprise in the state, hidden in plain sight as a government agency." I studied the documents. The scale was staggering. Hundreds of millions of dollars flowing through legitimate government channels, then vanishing into a web of offshore accounts and shell companies. Who knows about this? Just us. I tried to take it to my captain, but he shut me down, told me to drop it. That's when I knew the corruption goes all the way up. "We need to go federal." Patrick shook his head. "I tried. The FBI agent I contacted told me they have no jurisdiction over state infrastructure agencies without concrete evidence of federal crimes, and the evidence keeps disappearing. Files deleted, witnesses relocating, paper trails going cold." "So what do we do?" "There's one more bridge. The Blackstone Bridge. Been closed for 8 years. According to my investigation, it's the center of everything. Their main hub. If we can get evidence from there." I knew the Blackstone Bridge. It was the longest bridge in the county, spanning a deep gorge. It had been closed after a partial collapse that killed 2 people, deemed too expensive to repair. But if Patrick was right, that collapse might not have been an accident. "When?" "Tonight, before they realize I've been investigating." "Stephen, I know it's dangerous, but I'm in." We drove separately to maintain plausible deniability if things went wrong. The Blackstone Bridge was 50 miles from the city, accessible only by a winding mountain road that hadn't been maintained since the bridge closed. As we approached, I could see lights where there should have been darkness. The bridge was supposed to be abandoned, but it was lit up like a Christmas tree. Vehicles were parked at both ends, expensive cars, government plates, even a police cruiser. "Jesus," Patrick whispered. "It's a meeting." We concealed our cars and approached on foot, using the rocky terrain for cover. The bridge had been completely rebuilt, not just repaired. The structure that was supposedly too damaged to save was now a modern, fortified facility with security cameras and guards. Through binoculars, I could see people moving inside a glass-enclosed section at the bridge's center. Men and women in expensive suits, some faces I recognized from newspaper photos. City council members, state senators, police brass. "We need to get closer," Patrick said. We climbed down into the gorge, using the bridge's support structure to conceal our approach. Halfway across, we found an access ladder leading up into the bridge itself. The sound of the river below masked our movement as we climbed. Inside, we found ourselves in a maintenance corridor that ran the length of the bridge. Through ventilation grates, we could hear voices from the meeting above. Profit projections for the next quarter are excellent. The new preservation facility is operating at full capacity. What about the investigation into the Riverside operation? Contained. The officers involved have been redirected. I recognized that voice. Chief of Police Harrison, supposedly retired 3 years ago. Patrick was recording everything on his phone. We moved along the corridor, getting closer to the main meeting room. Through a larger grate, we could see the full assembly. 23 people seated around a conference table, with presentations showing on screens around the room. The man at the head of the table stood up. Governor Michael Ashford, younger brother of Vincent Ashford, the curator we'd arrested years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, for 30 years, the Bridge Authority has provided a unique service. We create spaces outside the law, places where necessary but illegal activities can occur. We don't judge our clients' needs, drugs, bodies, information, or darker appetites. We simply provide the infrastructure and protection. Murmurs of agreement around the table. But recent interference from overzealous law enforcement has threatened our operations. Officers Foster and Santos, Detective O'Neill, they've cost us millions and exposed several of our facilities. It's time we dealt with them permanently. My blood went cold. They were discussing our murders. The question is how to make it look accidental, Harrison said. Foster has been investigating Bridges for years. A tragic fall during a solo investigation wouldn't raise suspicions. O'Neill's been depressed since his partner was injured at Garrett Bridge, another voice added. Suicide would be believable. And Santos already left the force. Random street crime, perhaps. They were planning to kill us all, and they were doing it like they were discussing a business merger. Patrick and I looked at each other. We had enough evidence now, but we needed to get out alive to use it. That's when we heard footsteps in the corridor behind us. Guards doing a sweep. We moved quickly but quietly, looking for an exit. The corridor led to a room that made both of us stop in horror. It was a holding area with 6 cells, 3 occupied. The people inside were unconscious, IV drips keeping them sedated. Test subjects, Patrick whispered, reading from a clipboard hanging on the wall. For the new preservation techniques. One of the prisoners looked familiar. It was Agent David from the FBI, the same agent Patrick had contacted about the Bridge Authority. They're not just killing threats, I said. They're using them for experiments. The footsteps were getting closer. We had to make a choice, try to save the prisoners and likely get caught, or escape with the evidence and come back with help. Patrick made the decision for us. He started opening the cells, removing IVs, trying to wake the prisoners. We can't leave them. Patrick, we need to... The door burst open. 3 guards with weapons drawn. Don't move! Everything happened fast. Patrick lunged at the nearest guard. I drew my weapon, shots fired. Patrick went down, blood spreading across his shirt. I managed to hit one guard before the others overwhelmed me. I woke up in one of the cells, my head pounding. Governor Ashford was standing outside, looking at me with curiosity. Officer Foster, you've been remarkably persistent. I respect that, even if it's been inconvenient. Where's Patrick? Detective O'Neill didn't survive, I'm afraid. But don't worry, you'll be joining him soon. Though first, you're going to help us with an experiment. You see, my brother Vincent was onto something with his preservation techniques. But we've improved on them. We can now preserve bodies while keeping certain neural functions active. Imagine being conscious but unable to move, speak, or die. Forever. You're insane. I'm practical. Do you know how much certain clients will pay for a living sculpture? A conscious but paralyzed enemy they can keep as a trophy? The applications are endless. He walked away, leaving me to process the horror of what was planned. But Patrick hadn't just been recording on his phone. Unknown to me, he'd been wearing a wire, transmitting everything to a secure server he'd set up. His final act before confronting the guards had been to send an emergency signal with our GPS coordinates to every law enforcement agency in the state. I learned this later, after the raid. 3 hours after Ashford left me in that cell, The bridge was surrounded by federal agents, state police, and military units. The Bridge Authority had been classified as a terrorist organization, giving the FBI the jurisdiction they needed. The raid was swift and decisive. 18 arrests, including Governor Ashford, Chief Harrison, and most of the state's political elite. The prisoners were rescued, though Patrick was gone. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of the Bridge Authority's operations. For 3 decades, they'd been creating criminal infrastructure under the guise of public works. Every closed bridge was a potential site for illegal activities, generating massive profits that were funneled back into political campaigns and bribes. The body count was staggering. Over 300 people had been processed through their facilities. Hundreds more had been subjected to surveillance and blackmail. The drug network we'd disrupted was just one of dozens operating under their protection. But the most disturbing discovery was the extent of the experimentation. Vincent Ashford's preservation techniques had been refined and weaponized. They'd created a process that could keep a person in suspended animation indefinitely, conscious but paralyzed. 17 victims were found in this state. Some had been that way for years. The trials lasted 2 years. I testified in every one, describing what we'd found, what we'd seen. Governor Ashford got life without parole. The others received sentences ranging from 20 years to life. The Bridge Authority was disbanded, its assets seized, its infrastructure demolished. But I know it's not over. Organizations like this don't just disappear. They evolve, adapt, find new forms. The bridges are gone, but there's always abandoned infrastructure. Always shadows where corruption can take root. I still work the night shift, still patrol the rural routes. But now I'm not just watching for crime. I'm watching for patterns, for signs that something like the Bridge Authority is forming again. Because I learned the hardest lesson of all. The real monsters aren't hiding in the darkness. They're standing in broad daylight, wearing suits and smiles, running the very systems meant to protect us. Patrick O'Neill was posthumously awarded the Medal of Valor. At the ceremony, his mother asked me if he'd been scared at the end. I told her the truth. He'd been fearless, thinking only of saving others. I didn't tell her about his final words, whispered as he bled out in my arms. Don't let them rebuild. I won't, Patrick. That's a promise. The Blackstone Bridge was demolished last month, blown up in a controlled demolition that was broadcast on live television. They called it a symbol of corruption being destroyed, a new beginning for the state. But I was there, watching from the crowd, and I saw something others missed. In the dust and debris, someone had left a playing card, the 3 of diamonds, with new GPS coordinates. The game isn't over. It's just beginning again. I picked up the card and put it in my pocket. Tomorrow, I'll follow those coordinates, see what new horror is brewing in the abandoned places. Because that's what I do now. I stand watch against the darkness, knowing that it's not really darkness at all. It's the shadow cast by those in power, those who've learned that the best place to hide crime is within the law itself. Some nights, when I'm driving past where the bridges used to stand, I think about all the victims. The ones we saved and the ones we didn't. The ones who died quickly and the ones still trapped in that living death. I think about Patrick, about Maria who left to find peace, about Agent David who still wakes up screaming from nightmares of his captivity. But mostly, I think about the next bridge. Because there's always a next bridge. Always another piece of infrastructure being abandoned. Always another shadow where monsters can grow. And someone has to be there when they do. Someone has to remember what we learned at the cost of so much blood. The most dangerous criminals aren't the ones hiding from the law. They're the ones who write it. The radio crackles to life. Another call, another abandoned place, another mystery in the darkness. Unit 17 responding, I say, turning my patrol car toward whatever horror awaits. Because that's what I do. I answer the calls that come in the night, investigate the abandoned places, and stand witness to the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of our civilized world. The bridges may be gone, but their legacy remains. In every abandoned building, every closed road, every forgotten corner where shadows gather and monsters meet. And I'll be there, watching, waiting, remembering Patrick's final words.